Welcome to Novara Media's coverage of the latest big election event between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. This time they're not actually debating, but it's called Sky's Battle for No.10 event. It's in Grimsby. I'm Michael Walker. You probably know that by now. I'm joined by Ash Sarkar. Ash, how are you doing?
I'm good. You sound very chipper. Have you had some Pro Plus or something?
Well, I always have Pro Plus before the show, but I think I'm getting a bit manic today. I'm not sure why, for no good reason. Well, I think it's probably because we're actually going to play debate bingo, which I'm really looking forward to. I'll give you the words soon. By the way, this is your introduction now. Go get your favorite tipple, and I'll explain the rules in one moment. The format will run in this debate with each leader facing a 20-minute interview with Beth Rigby, then 20 minutes of questions from the studio audience, which will be made up of residents from the Grimsby area and others from elsewhere around the country. Ash, you watched the last ITV debate where Starmer and Sunak went head to head. Did you manage to stay alert, stay awake?
I did, but that's just because Aaron Bastani keeps me on my toes. I think that one of the things that really came across in that last debate is how tetchy Rishi Sunak gets. And I wonder if, because he's going last for this one, maybe that will, he'll sort of like build up the tension over the course of the evening. And then by the end of it, he'll just be like,
Yeah, and debates between both, I'm sure you can come up with a better football analogy than I can actually, Ash, but it seemed to me that you got sort of two very defensive teams. You tell me if I'm completely messing this one up, but it seemed like a sort of a match where both of them just really were happy with a draw. And so it was just so tetchy, so cagey. No one was really going out on a limb. Like it was, I found it actually quite uncomfortable to watch. Do you think this one might be a little bit more lively? We've got studio. I always like a studio audience.
I think the word you're looking for, Michael, was catenaccio, the very defensive Italian style of football. So I think you're right. In the last debate, both teams were playing catenaccio. Of course, a lot has changed since then. So, number one, you've got the release of the Tory party manifesto. Number two, I think the D-Day scandal has happened in between. Maybe I'm wrong on that because all the
That has
days
happened in
just
between,
blur
yeah.
into one. Yeah, so I reckon that there's going to be a bit more fire and brimstone.
We've got a clip of you coming up, Ash. If you're wondering how Sky chose who would go first, it is going to be Keir Starmer going first. This clip shows how they did it.
This is a bag with two balls in it. One is red and one is blue.
Stop laughing.
Sorry, it's a bag of balls.
This is not a time for sound bites, but I do feel the hand of history is in this bag right now. Which is going to come out first? Is it going to be the blue ball for Rishi Sunak or the red ball for Sir Keir Starmer? So here we go. Shake them up like they do for the football draws. Right. This is the moment. It's red.
So what does that mean?
That means Sir Keir Starmer goes first.
There you go. Keir Starmer first.
Rishi gets the last word.
Is that, you think they'll be happy with that, the Conservatives?
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. The red ball has come out first.
And let's have a look at the other
And
ball.
just to show that this
there's
is
no
not a
funny
fix,
business. It's not a fix.
There's the blue ball.
There's the blue ball as well.
Ash, you were very lucky to be present at such a momentous occasion. Time is running out before this starts, so I need to inform you of the rules of the PM debate bingo. You might have your tipple already. These are the words we're looking for from Keir Starmer. My dad was a toolmaker. I'm from an NHS family. Pebble-dashed semi. Changed Labour Party. And then some combination of Liz Truss chaos under the Tories. Those are your Starmer words. Your Sunak words, or phrases, let's say. This election is about the future. Please ignore the past. My dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. Trust me, I did furlough. Don't give Labour a blank check. And he wanted you to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I have tweeted this list. So if you want to play at home, you're like, that was said way too quickly. Go on my Twitter. You can get that up. Get your drink ready. And hopefully this is going to keep us alert over the next, I suppose, hour and 40 minutes or so. Ash, is there much to play for here? I mean, Sunak already knows the Tories are going to lose the election. What's the best case scenario for Rishi Sunak?
I suppose the best case scenario for Rishi Sunak is that Keir Starmer somehow manages to fall out of a window on his way out of the TV studio. Short of that, I don't think there's going to be anything that will really change people's minds. Maybe he'll be able to shore up some, wavering undecideds, but most of the undecideds have been breaking for Labour for quite some time now. I really don't think that there's much that Rishi Sunak can do. Unless he's got some like horribly compromising footage of Keir Starmer, really don't see what can turn it around.
It is kind of getting to that position, isn't it? Like there is no way they can do anything. I mean, they seem to be, the strategists are now saying they just want to lose not as badly as they could lose. So Grant Shapps today said the Tories don't want you to let Labour have a super majority. So if you're the governing party and you're saying, please give us at least 100 MPs, it's not looking particularly positive for them. Keir Starmer, I suppose, is mainly going to be trying to not F up, right? He's way ahead in the polls. You'd imagine he'd be giving a somewhat conservative performance and probably trying to put front and centre sort of being emotionally engaged with the audience as opposed to sort of getting caught up on the details of policy. We do want to know your thoughts. What are you expecting from this debate? Let us know on YouTube Super Chat. We'll show some on screen where we can, whenever we can, and go to some after the debate. Also, let us know what you've chosen as your drink. It is allowed to be a soft drink. We're a very inclusive show. To people who are teetotal, to people of different religions, maybe to recovering alcoholics as well. Drink whatever you think is appropriate. As ever, you know this already. We're funded by our audience at novaramedia.com/support to help us keep covering this general election. Do go and sign up. Ash, let's talk about politics. Go on. The Green Manifesto was launched today. What did you think about it? You going to vote Green?
I was thinking of being very private about how I'm voting this year, but fuck it, since you asked, yes, I am voting Green because I live in Tottenham. That's David Lammy's constituency. I made a decision quite a while ago that I wasn't going to vote Labour, and it was when Angela Rayner said, shoot terrorists first and ask questions later. And for me, one of the really important questions that you might want to ask before shooting someone is this person actually a terrorist? Because what happened to Jean-Charles de Menezes is that the police thought he was acting suspiciously and they shot him dead. I think that was a very important thing to learn from and never happen again. But because no one wants to hear caveats when it comes to shooting terrorists, there was no reason for Angela Rayner or Labour to back down. And I get that. I get that it's not going to be a massive vote winner. But for me, on a point of principle, I was like, I can't vote for that party that talks in that particular way about shooting to kill. So I made that decision quite a while ago. But with Labour's absolutely appalling response to Israel's bombardment of Gaza, their refusal to call it a genocide, only calling for a ceasefire after America had, there's no way I could in good conscience vote for David Lammy. So yeah, I think I'll be voting Green. I did have a look at the manifesto. Some stuff I thought was great. Ending right to buy, funding the NHS by implementing a wealth tax, good. But the areas where I do just fundamentally disagree with the Greens is on HS2. So they're in favour of high-speed rail, but when there was high-speed rail on offer, they were against it. And I don't buy the rationale that they've offered for it. And also, I think ultimately, while for a while I was very ambivalent about nuclear power and I was willing to listen to other people and I could see the cases for and against, I'm increasingly of the mind that we probably do need nuclear power. So I think that the sort of contradiction at the heart of the Greens, which is they understand more than any other party the need for rapid decarbonisation, but when it comes to building to decarbonise, they're not so strong on that. But they're not so weak that I won't vote for them.
Yeah, I agree. I want them to build more stuff. Build. I am going to vote Labour for one specific reason. Guess in the comments. If you can guess in the comments, you win absolutely nothing other than my respect. And goddamn, some of you need some more of that. Not really. I love you all. I always have. If you've just joined us, Sky's debate is beginning at 7:30. We'll go to it then. We thought it started at 7, which is why me and Ash have been filling time for half an hour. I've really enjoyed it, actually.
It's very nice.
What I am going to use this time for, by the way, actually, if you've got a pen at home, when the debate starts, it's not actually a debate, by the way. It's a sort of question time situation and then an interview. We're going to do a drinking game for when the predictable lines get used. So for Starmer, do you have a pen in your hand? My dad was a tool maker. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm from an NHS family, right? Number 3, pebble-dashed semi. Now, the context he says in this is he says, my mum and dad worked really hard to own their pebble-dashed semi. Changed Labour Party, said, especially sort of bonus points if it's said in a very sort of nasal, forced way. And then Liz Truss, chaos under Tories. So you've got those. My dad was a tool maker. I'm from an NHS family. Pebble-dashed semi. Changed Labour Party. Liz Truss / chaos under Tories. Those are your 5 for Keir Starmer. For Rishi Sunak, so you've got a pen ready? This election is about my future. Not my future. That would be a terrible thing to say, right? This election is about the future. So he always says that whenever he's asked about the Tory record. He says, yeah, the record's terrible, but this is about the future. Ignore the past. My dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. Trust me, I did furlough. Don't give Labour a blank check. And he wanted you to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. So those are your 5 for Sunak. This election is about the future. My dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. Trust me, I did furlough. Don't give Labour a blank check. He wanted you to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Right. I'm going to go to your answers for my quiz question. I think quite a lot of you have got this, to be honest. Does Michael live in Hackney? Yes. My MP will be, I'm calling it now, Diane Abbott. So I would have voted for, if she hadn't been able to stand again, I probably would have voted Green, I suppose. Yeah, I would have voted Green if she hadn't been able to stand. But as she has been able to stand, I get to very happily go into the polling booth and vote for Diane Abbott. Ash, prediction. Right, this is actually a genuinely difficult one. I don't like making predictions because when I make them, they're normally false. I don't actually have enough faith in my predictive capacity. I'm just a host. I ask the questions. I've really just, I really just sort of got used to that role. You know, I can suggest things which are plausible, but I've got no idea which of them will come to pass. But this is the question. Will, at any point, Reform UK overtake the Conservatives in any of the major polls?
I think they'll come close, but won't quite make it. The reason why I think that is that I'm not sure how much lower the Tory vote can fall. I think that they've perhaps hit their rock bottom. I mean, how many more D-Day commemorations are there for Rishi Sunak to walk out on? I mean, presumably
there's a lot of nurses he could punch.
July the 4th. There's a lot of nurses he can punch, but he's only small.
A lot of
paedophiles
he could shake hands with. You know, there's lots of things that could really go wrong in this campaign. There's a world of things worse than leaving a D-Day celebration a bit earlier. You could kill a veteran.
Shaking hands with nonsense has never been a problem for the Conservative Party before.
That's
they were very
true.
close to Jimmy Savile in the 1980s. I just don't think there's much lower than he can go.
Keir Starmer is going to be very, very happy with how this election campaign is going, I think. Mainly because Rishi Sunak keeps effing up over and over and over again. But also, I think you do have to give the Labour Party credit. Their strategy has, really worked up to this point, which is to say, we are going to make sure that the general public are not scared of Keir Starmer. And that means that if the Tory party collapse, they will vote for us. The Tory party has collapsed. The public aren't scared of Keir Starmer. And that's going to be very good for the Labour Party at this general election. Now, of course, that's not to give them sort of a pass with flying colours, because when they get into government, they're going to be in a very difficult situation, which is they've got a leader that no one really has any enthusiasm towards. No one's really going to give them the benefit of the doubt if things start to go wrong, because not being scared of a prime minister is not really good enough once they're actually Prime Minister, right? At that point, they've got to do something to improve your lives. And that's what we're yet to see from the Labour Party. Now, it would be interesting if, Beth Rigby were to get something out of Keir Starmer, which would be a bit more suggestive of what they would do in government, that would make some people a little bit more enthusiastic about the guy. I expect that won't happen here because Keir Starmer is still in election mode. He's going to play it safe. And we already know he has the kind of character where he doesn't mind being in one mode when a election is on. So we saw that in the Labour leadership election, and then switching to a completely different one after that election is over. So it's going to actually be more interesting to see what he says on July the 5th than now to July the 4th. Are we going to go and listen to these guys now? Fantastic. Fabulous.
This is the battle for number 10.
Keir Starmer, thank you so much for coming to Grimsby tonight.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you to the audience for being here.
Well, let's kick off. You told the country Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. You then expelled him from Labour. You campaigned for a second EU referendum. Now you don't talk about the EU. And you dumped all the left-wing policies pretty much you once loved. Your short political career is a catalogue, actually, of broken promises and changed positions. So how can the people in this room trust anything you say?
When we lost the 2019 election, we lost very badly as a political party, including here in Grimsby, where people felt that they couldn't vote for the Labour Party. And I concluded that I should listen to the electorate. And when you lose that badly, you don't look to the voters and say, what on earth do you think you were doing? You look at your party and say, we have to change. And the change that I wanted to bring about, and I have brought about, is to change the Labour Party, to put it back in the service of working people. And what has guided me through that at all times is that the country must come first and the party second.
I can't believe we didn't have that on the bingo card.
Difficult decisions to change our party.
But
that has guided me through.
But Sarkar, you get there's a trust issue here with voters. You accept that?
No, because what I would say is this. I decided it must be country first.
He's got the Bill Clinton thumb out, do you see?
I judged previous decisions, previous positions, and I said, is this truly country first, party second? And if the answer to that was no, then I changed the position and dragged my party back to the service of working people, because I want this time round to put a Labour Party in front of people here in Grimsby and across the country that they know is a credible party, that is putting the country first and has a clear plan for the future. And that's been the hard work I've done over the last 4.5 years.
Let's just go through that, because in the last two general elections, you asked people to elect Jeremy Corbyn as their Prime Minister. You said, I do think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn, did you mean that?
I was certain that we would lose the 2019 election.
That was
what a snake.
I was certain that we would. I was certain that we would lose
So I lied.
The audience don't like
I did
that.
campaign for Labour. Of course I did. I will openly say I campaigned for Labour. I wanted
good for admitting that.
Labour Party,
when you said it.
and I wanted a party that was capable of being changed so we could face the future again.
Did you not mean it when you said it?
I was certain that we would lose, and I think many other people were certain that we would lose.
So you didn't mean it?
I was certain that we would lose.
So you said it because you didn't think he would be Prime Minister anyway?
Of course I campaigned for the Labour Party at the last election and the election before that, and the one before that. I've always campaigned for the Labour Party, and I'm glad I did, because I wanted good colleagues to be returned to have their seats so that we could fight for the future of the Labour Party. So I make no apology for that. I fought for the Labour Party at the last election.
I'm just trying to make the point to everyone in here that you said that he would make a great Prime Minister. Now will you actually say, yes, I thought that, or I didn't think that at the time? Just be honest.
I honestly didn't think that we had a chance of winning that election.
So you said it anyway.
I wanted to campaign for our colleagues, and I then,
so you're a liar, yeah.
Once we got the result that we did, which were the results that I expected that we might get, as I say, I decided to step up to lead the party, not something I had planned to do when I came into Parliament.
Are you comfortable lying would be a good next question, you know?
And to put it back in the service of working people.
The reason and we will move on, it's a trust issue, right? Because
Well, look, let me deal with this issue.
Someone in the audience said you lied.
I went to Northern Ireland and worked with the police service over there. I said I would work with the team to change it, and we did. I then ran the Crown Prosecution Service. I was the chief prosecutor for 5 years.
That
I said
could have been on the bingo
change
card
the
as
Crown
well.
Prosecution Service, make it better, particularly on violence against women and girls. I changed it. We did it. I said I would change the Labour Party
That
4.5
got to do
years
with
ago. Most
lying
people said
in
to me, you can't do
2019.
it. I did. So I stand on my record.
OK, Sarkar, let's just go to your record, because I'm
Audience
going to
really
run you
don't
through
like
your
that.
record, because people have to judge whether to vote for you. Your past political record, when you stood for election as leader, you did so on the basis of 10 pledges. They were very left-wing. A couple abolished tuition fees, common ownership of energy, water. Did you write these pledges, Sarkar?
Yes, and I put them before the membership of our party. Most of them are still in place. I said that they were bound up with
I think you've dropped 6 or 7 of them,
economic
actually.
justice. No, that's not entirely true.
Oh,
But look,
the
I'm not
first
going to
laugh.
shy away. Have I changed my position on those pledges? Yes, I have, because I've asked myself, honestly, are these country first, party second? And if the answer to that question is no, then I've changed them, because I think this party
think they
should
were
always
wrong?
put the country
Sorry to
first.
interrupt.
But the other thing I'd say, Beth, because I do think this is important.
But do you think they're wrong in
The
principle?
question would be, did you
Let's
intend to keep
take
them?
energy nationalisation, which a lot of people think we should nationalise our energy companies. They're making a huge amount of money. Lots of people are paying a fortune on their bills. 2 years ago, at the height of the crisis, when people were facing very high bills, I said to my team, well, mock up for me, tell me how much it will cost to nationalise the energy companies.
What about taxing the rich?
That
How
ran
much
into
would that
tens of
cost?
billions of pounds.
That was one of
And
your pledges.
I had to take a decision, which is, do we use tens of billions of pounds to pay off shareholders to nationalise the
That might be
company,
the next question.
but
She's
not
good.
have
She's
any
doing well.
money to reduce your bill? I thought that would have been the wrong decision. I think most people watching this here or on the television would say, for heaven's sake, here, if it's a choice between keeping my bills low or paying off shareholders tens of billions of pounds, there's only one choice you can make. And that's what I mean by my country first, party second. I changed my mind. It was too expensive. I wanted to get the bills down.
We need to get to the audience questions, so let me rattle through this bit, if you don't mind. One of the pledges you can definitely afford to do, in fact, you might want to do, given the state of public services, is to raise tax on the top 5% of earners. That's anyone earning over £80,000
Michael, did
a
you
year.
write these
Why did you ditch that? You can do that. That money would be useful. It could make £2 to £3 billion a year for the public purse.
Let me be really clear about tax, because this has been a big issue in the last 3 weeks. So let me be absolutely clear. All of our plans are fully costed, fully funded. We will not raise tax on working people.
What about the
means
rich?
No tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT. Our manifesto comes out tomorrow. It's a very forward-looking manifesto, but there's nothing in our manifesto that requires us to raise tax.
Swerve the top 5% of earners
No, nothing requires us to raise tax.
Nothing in
And
the
I tell you-
manifesto that requires us to raise tax.
You're challenging me and I want to
Quite
deal with this.
definitive.
I want to do things differently. I want to grow our economy. I accept that previous Labour leaders have sort of pulled the tax lever every single time and driven up spending. I want to grow our economy. The manifesto tomorrow will be a manifesto, a plan for wealth creation. Now, you may not hear a Labour leader say that very often, but for me, that is the most important thing.
And
therefore, I'm not going to do what other Labour leaders have done and be tempted to simply say every time we're going to pull the tax lever. We're not going to do
Let's have
that.
some tax honesty,
He
because
pulls the lie
you
lever
often say
instead.
the country's public services are broken. Many people, I think, in this room will agree with that. That's why many people also suspect when you're in power, you will raise more tax. And I want you to be honest here, please. You've said you'll raise specific taxes on profits on oil and gas companies, closing loopholes on tax avoidance, tax reform on private equity, VAT on private schools. But the Tories say you will go further. They're right, aren't they? You will.
Well, the first thing I'd say is the Tories are in no position to lecture anyone about tax rises. We've got the highest tax burden.
First round of applause, fair enough.
For 70 years. And I think that working people shouldn't pay more tax, and we will not raise their tax. What we need to do is get the economy going. There's a reason that taxes have gone up so much in recent years,
Well,
and
I
that's because
suspect
the economy
that
is flatlining.
They might be very light on tax rises in the manifesto and save it for the budget.
For growth.
Yeah, exactly.
A detailed plan of the first steps we will do in government to get our economy working so that living standards go up and we have the money we need for our public services.
So no tax rises of any kind in the next Parliament under Labour?
No tax rises for working people, and nothing in our manifesto requires tax rises over and above those that we have specifically set out.
No tax rises in the next Parliament?
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises.
I mean, they are going to raise taxes afterwards. The thing that's kind of frustrating is
so you're not ruling out.
they say we can't afford to remove the two-child limit on child benefit, but he also says we don't need more money from taxing the wealthy. Let's go with what they're saying.
I've done this a bit. It does.
Look, I'm not going to sit here tonight and write the next 5 years' worth of budgets, and you wouldn't take me seriously if I did. What I will say is that we will not raise
tax. I just wanted to sit.
Yes, because
so you are ruling out some tax rises, but not all.
Because I think working people are paying too much tax, and I think paying far too much tax in recent years.
What I'm hearing
and I think that has made the cost of living crisis 10 times worse than it would otherwise be.
What I'm hearing is that you are not ruling out some tax rises, and you've talked about working.
But I have said that none of our... We're going to unveil our manifesto tomorrow. No tax surprises.
I got it.
There's going to be no need to raise tax from the plans we're setting out.
But the point is there are other taxes that affect working people, aren't there? What about council tax? I'm sure many people are worried about that, yeah? The Labour Party in Wales launched a review of council tax banding. Are you going to rule out a review in England too?
Well, council tax is too high for many people. It's been going up. It went up again this year, but that's because the government lost control of the economy.
You're not going to do a review of the council tax bans?
They should do a review of the council tax bans.
They were last revalued when I was a teenager, and I'm really old now.
Yeah. Beth, you're pushing me over and over again on tax. I'm not wanting to raise tax. I think people are taxed too much already. What I want to do, my central mission, is to grow the economy. I'm not going to apologise for that, because I genuinely think that if you don't grow the economy, then you're taxing an ever-diminishing return.
I mean, people here will be worried about fuel duty, right?
Yeah.
The Conservatives have frozen it since 2011. If you unfroze it, you could get 5 to 6 billion quid. That's a tax on working people.
Yes, and that's why you are going to
freeze it?
Every single budget, we have supported the freeze on fuel duty.
And you will continue to do that as Prime Minister if you would win?
We have to concentrate on growing the economy.
It's good that he's not committing to these things, by the way. We don't want him to rule out more tax rises.
We've supported the cap on fuel duty every single time it's come up.
Okay.
But I want to do things differently. If we just do things in the same way as we've done for the last 14 years, we'll end up in the same mess. I'm not prepared to do that. This election is an election about change, about doing things differently, about growing the economy and making sure we create the wealth so this country can run our public service. And
I'm going to have one more go.
I ran a public...
we can end
No. I do want to finish this. I ran a public service for 5 years. I ran a public service in the austerity years.
That should have been on the bingo card.
I know what it means to be a public servant. I absolutely care about our public services. My wife works in the NHS. My mum worked in the NHS.
There we go.
We got that.
I know what it means to the NHS. But so I absolutely want our public services to function.
There's sort of mutterings of discontent in the audience.
I've heard the specifics on certain taxes, but to be clear, council tax revaluation, which could put up council tax bills, fuel tax, you're not being explicit on it. And that is your prerogative. But what about capital gains tax? That's the tax you pay when you sell a valuable asset like shares or a second home. If you made capital gains tax the same level as income tax, you could raise £14 billion a year. That must be attractive to you if you want to repair public services.
That is not in our manifesto. That is not a choice that we are making. It will not be unveiled tomorrow. There's no surprises in our manifesto.
It won't be unveiled tomorrow. It'll just be unveiled in 3 months' time, which is good, by the way.
It's about how we tackle our planning laws, how we get the skills for our young people, people how we set up Great British Energy. This is going to be a publicly owned energy company so that taxpayers' money that goes into investing in energy comes back to the taxpayer. These are the ideas that we have that I want to put on the table to grow our economy for the future.
Just the reason I'm asking you this is I don't know if you remember that interview we did in September 2021 when I asked you about wealth taxes. You said people who earn their money from properties, dividends, stock shares, they should be looked at. We need to look at a range
because you're talking about me 3 years ago and all of my positions have changed since then.
Earn their money. So you were looking at wealth taxes. You are looking at wealth taxes. It's okay to say it.
We're not looking at wealth taxes. Nothing in our manifesto will require tax flows. You'll see it for yourself.
You won't rule it out.
Let's test this tomorrow. I invite all of you, please, if you get the chance tomorrow afternoon, have a look at the manifesto. We're launching it tomorroon morning, and you will see for yourselves that every single thing is fully
tactics, which is get elected on one set of policies and change once you're in office.
If it's not ruled out in the manifesto, it's on the
he
table.
is avoiding
so
pledges.
Let's just carry on. What about you? Personally, you earned £128,000 in tax last year. You paid £44,000 in income tax. That puts you in the top 2 to 3% of earners. Would you personally be happy to pay more tax?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I've always paid my tax in full. But, you know, and I accept I earn a lot of money in the job I am now in. But when I grew up, my dad was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet, which actually isn't a laughing matter. We couldn't make ends meet. We couldn't pay our bills. I know what it feels like to feel anxious about the next bill, which you can't pay. And a lot of what I recognise is a lot of people today are in precisely the same position as I was in. Politics is about your policies, of course it is, but it's also about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make your decisions? Who are you thinking about when you make your decisions? I'm thinking about the people who are struggling with their bills. I'm thinking about working people who deserve a better Britain. I'm thinking about working people who want their living standards to go up. And our plan for the country, which we will set out tomorrow, is a confident, hopeful manifesto for change.
Interrupt, but I'm nearly finished. Because I want to come on to something that matters to working people, and that's child benefits. At the moment, just to remind you all, if you probably know, there's a 2-child benefit cap for families, some of whom have more children than that. This is hitting some of the poorest and most vulnerable in Britain. The Resolution Foundation think tank says families cannot claim about £3,200 per extra child a year. Dozens of organisations, from the Trade Union Congress to the Church of England to the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, have called for it to go. Will you scrap it? Is that in your manifesto tomorrow?
No, it isn't. And it's been a really difficult decision for all the reasons you outlined, because the last Labour government had a laser focus on dealing with child poverty and did a huge amount of good work, including Sure Start and the programmes that were set up.
It costs £1.3 billion. All of those wealth taxes I was talking about, or the 5% on top earners, you could do that, and you could do that policy £1.3 billion a year.
Huge damage has been done to our economy under this government. Huge damage. And if we are able to come into government and form a government, we're probably going to inherit a broken economy, a broken NHS, broken public services.
What you would say from lifting all those kids out of poverty would probably cancel out the cost of implementing it, to be honest.
I can't do something which I know the benefits of it. We need to deal with child poverty, and we will have a strategy for child poverty. But I think people are fed up with politicians who, before the election, say we'll do everything, and then after the election they don't.
Who was the last politician to do that, Keir Starmer? 10 pledges.
I'm going to tell you.
We are tired of people who say one thing and then do another.
Some things are good things to do.
So, Keir, I'm going to interrupt now because I'm nearly out of time. It would lift 1 million kids out of poverty. And just to be clear, you're choosing not to do it.
It's a difficult choice. We will have an anti-child poverty strategy, of course we will. The last Labour government did. We will have one. But the easiest thing in the world, it's what Rishi Sunak is doing, is to simply say you can have everything. Unfunded commitments, unfunded promises. That's what got us into this problem in the first place. And working people are paying the price with higher bills, their mortgages. I'm not prepared to have a Labour government ever make that mistake again.
Sarkar, some people feel that they don't really know you. Some people say you change your mind all the time, and I hinted at some of that Some people say you're boring and stiff. Tell me something. Tell me something, a morsel about yourself that will change people's minds.
Well, look, all my life I've believed in service. That is why I worked in Northern Ireland with the police service of Northern Ireland to ensure it had the confidence of both communities. I thought that was a really important thing. That's why I worked and headed up the Crown Prosecution Service, public service. That's why I came into politics when I finished as Director of Public Prosecutions.
Life of service. I want to hear about how you smoked crack with Rick James.
About,
That's what people want to hear.
And I said, no, I want to serve my country, which is why at a late stage, actually, I came into politics to serve my country.
This is why we don't stand for election,
Ash. Was your wife not keen for you to do this?
No, she wasn't at all. She
I'm going to tell you an interesting story.
It's
going to end my career, but I'll tell you it.
Not have all of the, challenges that you get as a politician. But I was clear in my mind. I wanted to come into politics because I wanted to serve my country. And I've waited 9 years now in opposition. I've worked 4.5 years to put my party back in a position where I can put it before you and others, the voters, as the only party that's got a plan for the future.
If you become Prime Minister in 3 weeks' time, what do you fear the most?
Oh, the only real fear, I suppose, I have is for my family. I've got a boy who is just turning 16, he's 15 and 3/4. I've got a girl who's 13. These are really difficult ages for children. If they're under 5, it would probably be easier. If they were 20 or over, it'd be easier. And my only fear, really, is the impact it's going to have on them. That's why we never name them in public, never have a photo shoot with them. I want them to be able to walk to school and have their own lives unaffected as much as I can by what I'm doing. And that, I don't fear the big decisions. In fact, I relish the chance to change our country. And on the first day, I want to start on our first steps. I want you to see the change that we can bring about. But my only fear is actually, and the only thing that sort of puts me up
that would be losing a nuclear sub.
Any doubt that you're up to the job?
No, not at all. I've led different organisations. I've changed them.
That would be really embarrassing.
I want the opportunity to change the country.
Good answer from him, but I do prefer yours, Ash.
15, 20 minutes, got on to the future and this growth process that you're going to go through.
Well, thank you for raising that, because we've got, what we've done is we've set out the big change that we want to make, but also what the first steps will be that we can do on day one. So the day after the election, I want to start on our first steps, stabilising the economy to make sure we never go through a cost of living crisis like this before, set up Great British Energy so we can keep your bills down. I want to start on the 40,000 appointments each and every week that we need to get the waiting list down in our NHS. We will be doing that the morning after the election, and that is what I look forward to most.
Well, I do mean to interrupt. We've got to get to the audience questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming and doing that with us. And now you've got some harder questions from this lot.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, there you are, the audience questions getting underway a little bit early. You heard what Sir Keir Starmer
So I think we've probably
had to
got a
say
little
to Beth
while until they actually go to the audience, it sounds like, doesn't it? Ash, I think he'll be happy with that. I mean, obviously it was difficult for him when it came to the sort of, you've been a little bit dishonest, he doesn't have any answers when it comes to that. But in terms of not committing to not increasing taxes, which I don't want him to commit to not increasing capital gains tax. So I'm glad he managed to swerve that. I want them to be able to increase as many taxes on the rich as possible when they get into power. And I think he probably managed to do that without looking too shifty. I suppose because the audience don't really care if he increases capital gains tax anyway. We're about to go back to the audience now, though. Let's have a look.
Right. Now, our first question comes from Sharon, who is from Grimsby. Sharon, where are you? There she is. Sharon. Take it away, Sharon.
So, as someone born and bred in Grimsby, I'm proud of our town, but it has some of the most disadvantaged areas in the country, with high levels of child poverty, inadequate social housing, and increasing numbers having to use food banks. How will Labour address these inequalities and improve outcomes for the most disadvantaged residents, both here and across the UK?
Well, thank you for that.
Good question.
I've been to Grimsby a number of times now, and my strong impression is that you're absolutely right about the challenges that people are facing, and we've had discussions about that even this morning with various groups around Grimsby. The very real challenges, the cost of living crisis, the challenge that people have with schooling and with health. But what I've also been struck by is the pride and ambition that people have in their place and in Grimsby, and the sense that they want a government that matches their own ambition. I think the way to do that is to ensure that the government works with local communities, local businesses. We need a growth plan for Grimsby, which your fingerprints are on. I don't want someone standing in Whitehall and Westminster looking at a map and deciding what they think is best for Grimsby, because I think with people with skin in the game are the people who make the best decisions. So I want a government that partners with you, drives through the change, creates the conditions for businesses to thrive. If that means changing the planning rules so we get our roads sorted out, the congestions and the potholes are an absolute nightmare. Create the conditions for businesses to thrive. I was really struck the time before last I was up here. I was looking at some of the offshore wind turbines.
Smart loads go on potholes. People do care about it.
In Grimsby, brilliant young people, by the way, who all lived within about 20 or 30 minutes, of where they're working. And they were very skilled going out to maintain those wind turbines. We need more of that. The supply chains for that should be in and around here, so they're not other parts of the country or abroad. That's the sort of challenge that I relish. It's what I want to do on day one, which is to get to this place where I can roll up my sleeves, work with you, have the respect to listen to what you're saying here, not sit a long, long way away and make decisions about what should happen in Grimsby. And I'm convinced that if there's a government that has ambition that matches the people of Grimsby,
he's a lot less wooden than he used to
we can move
be.
this forward very, very quickly. And I can see some of the green shoots there already, because some of the work that's going on, we had a round table this morning with some of the businesses, the community groups here in Grimsby that were telling me not just the struggles and the challenges, but what they were doing about it. I want to roll up my sleeves and work with them and to say the government is on your side. That would be a massive difference to the last 14 years.
Big round of applause.
How it's all going to be funded? If taxes are not going up, how are you going to fund it?
We need to put...
Good follow-up.
We need to put money and resource into Grimsby. We need resource decision-making to come. So we have to be bold enough in government to release that so that there's more power here in Grimsby. They're difficult things to do. Governments haven't done that in the past, but we have to do that. Some of it we can do straight away. The potholes that are driving everyone mad because their cars get damaged, it costs them hundreds of pounds, and if you need your car or your van for work, it's a complete nightmare because you can't actually use it. That can be done straight away. We've been setting out our plans on that. Childcare came up this morning in a discussion I was having. We want to create 100,000 new places for childcare. This is 3,000 nurseries around schools, because I think primary schools are the best place for nurseries, so that means children get the opportunity to develop the skills that they need before reception year, which isn't happening in the way it should at the moment, in my view. But also, parents and carers can go back into work, which many of them want to do, and that then helps the local economy. There are things that we can do, goes back to my point. We've got first steps, the things we want to do the day we get into government. If we're elected in, that I want to start, and I've said to my shadow cabinet, I want you to prepare months ago for the first day in government. I don't want you picking up the phone on day one. I want to know you're ready. And that's why I'm so confident that we can do this as soon as we get the chance, if we do get a chance, to bring about the change this country so desperately needs.
OK, thank you. I've got so many questions.
That's all right.
Look at them all. Oh, so many questions. And the next one comes from Jonathan. He's a junior doctor from Leeds. Jonathan, there he is. Thank you.
So I've been on strike because I earn more money per hour working part-time as a university student than I do as a newly qualified doctor. Abysmal pay, conditions and morale mean that more of my colleagues than ever are planning their exit, and I worry about what this means for my loved ones and the wider general public. Scotland and Wales have decided that they can pay NHS doctors fairly. How and when will you commit to doing the same in England?
Well, we won't be able to do anything unless we win the election.
Around the
We've
negotiating table, that's what he's going to say.
So far, I have been frustrated, if I'm honest, that these strikes have gone on as long as they have gone on. The strikes are very bad for patients. People are very anxious about the strikes. I don't think doctors want to be on strike. As I said earlier, my wife works in one of the big London hospitals, so I know firsthand and relayed every night the pressure that NHS staff are under. It's been unrelenting during COVID, unrelenting now because of waiting lists. So what we would do is, instead of arguing about who gets in the room first to negotiate with the doctors, we would roll up our sleeves in a grown-up way, get in the room and settle this dispute so that patients can get the care they need, doctors can get back to work, and the country can move forward. Because we can't go on like this anymore. And the sooner we have a bit of grown-up politics in this, the better, I think, because we absolutely need to move forward as a country.
Are you going to pay them more?
I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to be a grown-up. I'm going to get in the room. I'm going to sit at the table.
Well, the doctors say they want 35%, and I've had to say...
we don't. We want a path to pay restoration.
No, I get that, but again,
our
I want to be
cut in
straight
real
about this.
terms,
Yeah,
and we're looking to make that... The 35% thing is not...
Pay, progression, conditions, and
about.
all of that can be negotiated. On the 35%, I don't think we can afford that as a country because of the damage that's been done to the economy. I don't want to pretend to you that we can. I'll sit down in a room and negotiate and find a way through this, just as has happened in other countries, because it's intolerable that we go on. But I'm not going to start with the proposition that we simply accept whatever the other side is asking for. That's not how negotiations go. And you wouldn't respect a government if it operated in that way. And other people in other walks of life have got constraints.
I think the union's having 35% as the starting claim did kind of backfire. I can see why they did it. They want pay restoration, fair enough.
Say we want a deal, but we won't go into the room first. It's for the doctors.
Never wanted a deal.
Well, I think you may be right. And the fact they've left this to the election without fixing it and just booted it the other side of the election, I think is disgraceful. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do patients any good. And it doesn't do the country any good. But we've had a government that's chaotic, that's divided, has broken just about everything they've touched. I don't know a period in history, and you will all think about this, where almost everything is now in a worse state than when they started in government. And this is not about Labour or Tory. If you leave your country in a worse state than when you came into government, you should be booted out.
OK.
He's right.
I think that could have been a tricky one. I think he came out of it all right because, like you said, 35% is a hard number to get people to swallow.
Where is he? There you go, please.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm an average working parent from London, and I send my daughter to a private school, which in turn saves the government about £7,500 per year.
You're not getting a round of applause, mate.
To pay 20% VAT.
You're not an average working parent, mate.
We have to send our children to state school. The fact, it in fact beats the objective of collecting tax. Rather, it increases the influx in public schools. So private schools is not only for the rich. I mean, the rich would continue sending their children. It's us who would have to make the change. And the ultimate losers in all of this are the children, who are meant to be our futures.
Yeah.
So would you reconsider taxing private education?
Look, let me be really clear about what we're doing here. I have nothing against private schools. I absolutely recognise
this is a great policy for Labour because it's such a good argument to be having.
Work hard and save hard to send their children to private schools because they have aspiration for their children. I equally accept that every parent has aspiration for their children, whether they go to private school or not. But I absolutely respectfully want to make your point because it is a concern. It's a concern to you and to other people. In our state secondary schools, we've got thousands of teachers missing in the subjects that we need. So in a state secondary school, let's take maths. Too many students, young people, children are being taught by maths by sports teachers, by supply teachers, and that's not acceptable. And for those children in a state secondary school who don't have the teachers they need...
That's sort of middle-class parent nightmare, isn't it? PE teacher, teaching my kid maths.
It's fair enough, though. You don't want a PE teacher teaching your kid
No, it's a fair enough point. It's a fair enough point, but it's such a powerful image.
6,500 teachers for our state secondary schools to make sure every child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, whichever school they go to...
Keir Starmer 1, private school parent 0.
And I'll be pressed when I say going to recruit 6,500 teachers.
It's like Alien versus Predator, isn't it?
The money for that. And I say we will get rid of the tax break for private schools and use that money directly to fund those teachers in our state secondary schools.
We still need chaos under the Tories and pebble-dashed semi. I'm worried we're not going to get them.
It's a political choice. It's actually a tough choice. I do understand what you're saying. I don't think it will lead to lots of people going to state education. We have done some analysis on this, but it's a choice. I think every single child, whatever their background, wherever they're from, should have the chance and to believe, genuinely believe, that success belongs to them. Yeah, of course.
But this would mean that you would tax the working parents who send their children to private school. Because the super rich will continue doing that. And it's only the working parents who will have to...
No one cares about the parents between the 6th richest percent and the 7th richest percent. Like, dude, you're not going to get people's sympathy here.
You pay VAT on other services, but you don't pay it for private schools. Now, I understand why that's been in place, but it's a tax break that we are removing. It's not an introduction of a new tax. We're simply saying we need to find the money to properly fund our state secondary schools so that in maths, to take an example, it's not the only example, I want every child to have a maths teacher teaching them maths because it's the Prime Minister says he wants maths to the age of 18. Let's first get the right teachers for every single child up to 16 because at the moment they don't have it. And I genuinely worry, if you don't get maths at the right level in your GCSEs, it's really difficult to go on to A-levels. It's really difficult to go on to apprentices. And that child will be held back. Now, this is difficult stuff, but I'm not going to tolerate the fact that we haven't got the right teachers in our state secondary schools. That's the position we're in now. It's a disgrace in that position.
I'm going to interrupt you because I've got so many audience questions and I'm going to be in trouble with them if I don't get through them and you'll be gone and I'm the one in trouble. So I've got Kerry from Grimsby. Kerry?
Yes, hi.
Please.
Hi. Good evening, Sarkar. My NHS dentist practice went private and gave us a choice of either staying and paying private or finding a new practice. I've currently been on that waiting list for over a year with no idea of how long that waiting list is.
It's going to be screwed, man.
How would you
These questions are easy for Star, but they're going to be a nightmare for Sunak.
Private.
We need to make sure that...
That's driving me mad.
This is a huge problem because we don't have enough NHS dentists for adults or for children, and some areas are deserts now where you simply can't get an NHS dentist. So we've got to fix this. The two things that we would do, three things, but the first is to make the money available for 700,000 urgent appointments in NHS dentistry, including 100,000 for children, which is desperately needed. The second is to incentivise newly qualified dentists to set up as NHS dentists by paying them money to put down their roots in the areas where they're most needed so we can recreate those NHS dentist practice. We have to do this. In addition to the people who are frustrated in the way that you rightly are, I was genuinely shocked the other day. I went to Alderhay Children's Hospital. This is a brilliant hospital. Do you know what? For 6 to 10-year-olds, the most common cause of admission to hospital is rotting teeth, to have their teeth taken out because they haven't seen a dentist. It's a disgrace in 2024 England and not Scotland and Wales.
Good answer.
That was quicker, at least.
You were. Do you use a private dentist?
Well, we're at an NHS dentist practice, but I'm private because I'm an adult and therefore don't get it on the NHS, but our kids get NHS dentistry, and I believe in it.
OK.
The nearest one available is somewhere.
I think you can get...
Yeah, and that's
got
the
an
problem.
NHS
You've
dentist.
got vast areas where it's not just how much it is, it's also the just isn't a dentist there, which is why...
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but
in 2024,
I'm sure you still have to pay for it, but you pay NHS prices.
In our country, I mean, what on earth has happened to get us to this place? We've got to fix it. I look forward on the first day we get into government to starting on this job. I find all of that much more interesting than all the sort of talking about what you're going to do. I just want to get on with the job.
The first day we get into government, bold.
Being attacked on camera now.
OK, next question is from Cayman, who's from Yorkshire. Cayman, where are you?
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hi. I admired how in touch you were with the public when you were obviously a solicitor and then you became Director of Public Prosecutions with CPS. But over the last year, I feel like you've formed into more of a politician than the person that I would have voted for to run the country. You seem more like a political robot. How are you going to convince others like me to vote for you?
Well, the most... Look, all I can say, I went to run the Crown Prosecution Service. You referenced that. I was the Chief Prosecutor for 5 years. effectively
just upset I
bringing
don't
in
mind being
every
boring,
criminal
right?
prosecution in England and Wales, including here in Grimsby, in our courts to make
had
sure
too many
that where
interesting
people
prime
broke the
ministers.
law, they were prosecuted and you were kept safer as a result of that. Working, of course, with my staff. I worked before that in Northern Ireland, so I've had this constant theme in my life of trying to serve the public. That's why I worked in Northern Ireland. That's why I worked in the Crown Prosecution Service. That's why I took the decision to go into politics. I came into politics quite late in life. I'd done other things beforehand. But I took the decision that I couldn't take the issues, make the changes that I thought were necessary unless I went into politics. I was frustrated.
Do you think you've changed?
Well, I've been much clearer in my own mind that the country must come first and the party and party politics second. I'm really, I don't apologise for that.
We would have been really drunk if that was on the bingo card.
I think it probably is a result of coming into politics late because I'm not tribally political. I actually do believe there are good people who vote other than Labour who want their family, their community and their country to go forward. And that's why I've said if we are to come into power, I want a decade of national renewal and I want everybody who wants the country to improve to feel that there's a place for them, whether or not they traditionally voted Labour, because I actually genuinely think that the vast majority of people in this country are reasonable people, they're tolerant people who sort of live and let live, and if given the chance would pull together to advance their community, to advance their family.
Not really an answer to like, mate, you're boring. You come across studied, is it? I think he could just be like, probably am a bit boring. That's fine.
Pull the country together,
I'm gonna
and that would be a real moment for us.
I'm going to have to, because I'm...
Yeah, of course, that was a bit long. Apologies.
Cayman, did he convince you? Yes or no?
I hope you don't answer the questions, how you answer the questions, and I hope you never answered them the way that you did when you were a solicitor, because you don't seem to answer the question.
Okay. I'm gonna...
Not an overwhelming applause for that. I think Keir Starmer has persuaded the room.
Because we're nearly out of time, but I have Kieran from Guildford. You've got under the line. Where are you? Please go ahead.
Exactly.
Good evening. Young people in this country have grown up knowing nothing but conservative austerity and political chaos. We didn't have the chance to vote for Brexit in 2016 because we were too young, and now we're inheriting that economy. We're graduating from university, are less likely to own a home than our parents, all while paying a higher effective tax rate because of student loans that wasn't a thing generations ago.
You know?
How can you convince us that you are truly going to be different and actually effective at making change, not just in terms of the economy, but also to improve our trust in political institutions?
I need a quick answer, please. I need a quick answer, please.
First, by absolutely being clear that I understand the challenges that you are setting out. And that's because I do something which I think is underrated in politics and leadership, which is to listen, to use these, to listen to the challenges that people are talking to people. I go around the country the whole time. The most important thing I say to everybody I meet, please tell me the change you want if we're able to come into government, and I will mull that over in my mind on the train or in the car on the way back, because you have the right to put your fingerprints on what comes next. But just to address the specific things, we need good quality, high-skilled jobs for the future for our young people. That's why I was so impressed, and when I saw those apprentices here in Hull who had skilled jobs that they were proud of doing with a future to them. We need to make sure that we're building enough houses so that young people can get on the housing ladder. At the moment, the idea that you have to be in your mid to late 30s before you get your own roof over your head is a sign of a broken system, because I know from growing up how important it is to have your own home as a base camp for your dreams, your aspirations, for the security of your family. So we will build those 1.5 million homes.
That will getting Pebble Dash
happen if we partner with business, if we get rid of some of the planning rules that are in the way, and if we have a set of arrangements with mayors and combined authorities to get that building done. Because otherwise, you simply will be in the same position.
I'm going to have to interrupt.
Your dreams,
thank you so much.
We got 3 out of 5.
Us in Grimsby tonight.
My dad was a toolmaker. I'm from an NHS family, changed Labour Party. We didn't get Pebble Dashed Semi, and we didn't get Liz Truss or chaos under the Tories, which is interesting, actually, sort of move beyond that.
Well, that was Keir Starmer. Next up is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Don't go anywhere.
Ooh. Ash, your sort of instant reaction to that. I think Keir Starmer's going to be very happy with that. I think when he was speaking to the live audience, he sounded the most confident I think I've ever heard him sound. He sounded quite natural. The interview with Beth Rigby was awkward because she had some good questions which were difficult to answer. But I suppose his main thing coming out of that is he didn't want to give the Tories a headline saying he backed Jeremy Corbyn. And I think maybe by the end of it, people will have forgotten that he looked a bit shifty at the beginning. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe I'm being a bit beer goggled in terms of my sort of impression of Keir Starmer.
No, I think you've got it about right. I think that was the most confident and loose that we've ever seen him. I think that his tendency not to answer difficult questions, that's not so much of a problem when you're riding high. We saw that with Boris Johnson. When you've got the political momentum, by which I mean political media, behind you, you aren't going to be torn to shreds on it in the same way. But those are weaknesses to look out for when he's in government and when the honeymoon period has worn off. Those questions around personal integrity, that's I think where he was weakest. I can see that he's not getting what he wants to do is not have a single headline that says Keir Starmer, pledges tax rises or tax rises on the way, Starmer says. That's the one thing that he's trying to get around. So I imagine that in a strange way, when it comes to the manifesto being dropped tomorrow, you might have learnt from Boris Johnson, keep the manifesto slim. Just have the top line of political narrative, change from the Tory government being this one, and do it all in the budget.
And there is something dishonest about it, sort of very clear. I mean, it's very, very clear that they want to increase certain taxes after the election. They don't want to talk about it now. And it probably would be better if we had the kind of political culture where you could say that before the election. But you can see how their election strategists have said, don't rule it out, but also say it's not going to be, I can see what they're doing. And I think sort of if you're Keir Starmer's advisors, you'd say, given the circumstances, he performed quite well there, and I think you could see he'd won over the audience by the end of it. Super chat from Martin Staller. You used to be able to train to be a nurse with a diploma instead of a degree. Nurses wouldn't have the burden of tuition fees with a degree. That's interesting. So maybe it was better when it was a diploma before it was a degree. If you've been enjoying Novara Media's election coverage, you might want to become a financial supporter of our organisation. To do that, you can go to novaramedia.com/support, donate whatever you can manage. A monthly donation is especially ideal and appreciated because then we can plan into the future. Let's go to another comment from Straight Jacket Fashion. I feel a little sick when he's referred to as Sir. I think it is very handy for the guy that he is constantly referred to as Sarkar, because it does sort of give him, undoubtedly sort of an air of legitimacy and grandeur among the public. Ash, Sunak's up next. Basically, the big problem for him is that the atmosphere in the room is going to be completely different because everyone hates Rishi Sunak. I think lots of people are neutral about Keir Starmer and they despise Rishi Sunak.
Everybody hates Rish. Yeah, the thing is that he's tried to make it about the future. The problem is he's carrying the can for 14 years of Tory party policy.
All right, I'm going to have to interrupt you, Ash.
Nothing substantive to offer.
We've heard from the Labour leader. Now it's the Prime Minister's turn.
The man you all hate.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us tonight in Grimsby.
Good evening, Beth. Thanks for having me.
PM, polling day is 3 weeks tomorrow, but it's rough, isn't it? A poll out this week put the Conservatives on 18 points, just about neck and neck with Nigel Farage's reform. And your polling is now worse than in the dying days of the Liz Truss government. What's going so wrong?
Well, I've got to say, Beth, it hasn't been an easy 18 months in general. So what I've done, though, is just keep going to try and do my best for people. And that's what I'm doing in this campaign. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to everyone, not just tonight, but across the campaign, out and about in the country, about our plans for the future, because I know we've been through a tough time. Of course we have, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. It's been tough for all of you here tonight, everyone watching. But I do believe we've turned a corner, and we've got a clear plan for the future to make a difference to people, to cut their taxes, to bring down immigration, to protect pensions. Those are all things that I think matter. I think those are things that people want, and so I'm going to keep fighting hard till the last day of this election.
PM, Liz Truss never recovered from that disastrous mini-budget. Do you worry that your fateful decision to skip part of those D-Day commemorations could prove as terminal for you?
Well, the last thing that I wanted to do was cause anyone, and particularly our veterans community, any hurt or upset. It was a mistake, and that's why I apologised unreservedly for that. And I'm deeply sad to have caused people hurt and upset by that. I was privileged to participate in all the commemoration events that I did, to speak to many veterans, to thank them in person for what they did, but also make sure that I can demonstrate to them how committed I am to making this the best country in the world to be a veteran through all the things that we are doing in government.
And when you realised the mistake and you apologised, how were you feeling? Did you feel really awful? How was it for you?
Yeah, I was incredibly sad to have caused people hurt and upset. That was actually the last thing that I wanted to do, and as I said, I hope people can find it in their hearts to forgive me when I realised I made a mistake. I apologised.
Was it humiliating?
Forgiveness, and also I have
Did you
been speaking
hate
to
yourself,
veterans about
Rishi?
the things that
Did
we
you
are
scream
doing
into a pillow?
to make sure this is a good country for them.
Do you think your
after
wife
they
has
serve.
less respect for you now?
Enormous debt of gratitude, and that's why I've made sure it's a priority to have a minister around the cabinet table to support them and focus on the things that matter to them.
OK. Prime Minister, let's go on to the Tory record. You say that you're the one who can deliver stability after all the turmoil, but for many voters, the Conservatives are the turmoil. In this Parliament, we've had 3 Prime Ministers, 5 Chancellors, 5 Home Secretaries, 6 Health Secretaries. How do we know that if you won the general election, you'd still be Prime Minister in a year's time?
She has the tone just right, I have to say.
I can appreciate people's frustrations. Of course, we haven't got everything right. I don't think any government does, and I know it's been very difficult for many people. But what I can do is work as hard as I can to deliver the stability that I said I would. And I've had this job for 18 months, and I think particularly on the economy, as I'm sure we'll get into, people can see that inflation is back to normal, the economy's growing, wages are rising, and that's why we're having this election now, to talk about the future. And yes, I've got a track record over the past 18 months, which I'm
I was drinking that already, but that was that.
But also, I want to build on that and continue the progress we've made, whether it's cutting people's taxes.
When they say inflation's back to normal, what they mean is that it's growing slower than it was, but it's still growing.
Well, inflation's always at 2%.
Kept up with it.
Yeah, inflation's always at 2%, but yeah, food prices are still way high. That's what people notice.
Yeah, the thing I'm saying is that it's up here. People don't feel like, oh, it's better now.
I think if
people are like,
thinking
shit,
about that,
it's really
they can
expensive.
think about what I did. I spent, and you and I spent some time that summer, you interviewed me, I did an event like this at the time, because I disagreed with her economic policies. And actually it wasn't easy for people to hear what I had to say, but I believed very deeply then in what I was saying, and I went round the country then talking
To
about
his
it.
credit, he did have a
doing
much more honest leadership campaign than Keir Starmer.
together as well, and you interviewed me, and that's who I am as a person, even though that wasn't an easy thing, even though back then actually it was difficult for me and I was behind. I was talking about what I believe was right for our country, and that's who I am as a person, and I was right about that, and that's why people can trust me now when it comes to what I say about the economy today.
Well, look, let's get on to your pledges. Let's get on
We've got
to
Trust
you
Me,
now.
I Did Furlough, so we're not quite there.
In 2023, you made the British people 5 promises. You said, no tricks, no ambiguity. We're either delivering for you or we're not. So I ask you to judge us on the effort we put in and the results we achieved. 5 promises. Let's talk about the promises. Promises 1 and 2, halving inflation, growing the economy. You've done that.
Well, the most important priority was the first one, because when I got this job, inflation was at 11%. And I think everyone knows the last few years have been difficult, the impact that was having on all your bills. Every week you were seeing the impact in your shop, and that's why my priority was to bring down inflation, so to ease that burden. And it wasn't a given. And it was 11%. Now it's back to normal, ahead of our competitors, which is the result of a lot of hard work.
So let's just go through the pledges, because...
Yes, inflation is, of course. I know things are not easy.
I think that was them saying it's still incredibly expensive because the prices haven't come down.
But what I was absolutely set about doing was making things that little bit easier.
Well, look,
that's why inflation was a priority. And it was precisely because the bills were continuing to go up that we needed to bring inflation down, and I'm pleased that we're able to do that.
Halving inflation, economy
doesn't have a
growing,
good tone with members of the public.
Promise number 3, reducing national
It's like
debt.
he's
It's gone
going,
up since you made
but
the
I'm
pledge,
right.
hasn't it?
Yeah.
It has.
Yes, but it was always meant to come down over time, and that was always the time. I know, but
what was it when you made the pledge?
But we measure our debt according to an independent body
But
measures
it's
our
higher
debt.
now than it was when you made the pledge, right? It's
Yes,
high.
it was always forecast to be high. Let me be clear, Beth. I was never saying it would come down overnight. I was very clear at the time.
You made the pledge in January 2023.
And when I made the
and
pledge...
you're going into an election, I'm just making the point that you failed on that pledge as you go to the polls.
No, because when I made the pledge, I was very clear that we measure our debt reduction according to an independent body.
No tricks, no ambiguity.
No tricks, no ambiguity. None at all. Right? We have an independent...
This man is screwed.
I'm happy to explain. So we measure our debt reduction independently. It's actually not
I'm
me
going to
that does
explain
it.
to
It's
all
an
of you
independent
idiots
body
who do
called
not understand basic economics.
to bring debt down over 5 years, and that's how
Famously
they measure it.
explaining, you're losing.
And you can go look at it online, that we are meeting those fiscal rules.
Okay.
And when I made the announcement, I think you were there at the press conference
was
when I
there.
did, I actually was asked the question, and I explained then, they said, how are you measuring this? And I said, we're measuring it according to the independent body which will adjudicate our rules. And we've met all those rules, because that's really important to me.
Let's crack on.
But no, just
Cutting
before
NHS waiting list, that's pledge 4. When you made the promise, the list was at 7.21 million. It's now at 7.54 million cases. It's gone up.
Yes, it has. Yes, I'm very good. We've not made as much progress on cutting waiting lists as I would have liked, and that was something that I was keen to do, and it has proved more difficult, and it's been proved more difficult for a number of reasons. Obviously,
He's
recovering
not having a good
from the
time, is
pandemic
he?
is not easy, but we are now making progress. And actually, the number that you gave is just over 200,000 lower than it was a few months ago, because now
it's gone up from when you made the pledge.
Yes, it has. It has. Yeah. I'm being very clear about that. But now it's coming down.
Okay.
Because we are now, the plans are working.
You made the pledge
We've
in
resolved
January
the industrial action.
and they're going up. Okay, let's go to the 5th pledge.
Well, I think you had a question earlier from, I think there was a junior doctor here, and I think everyone knows the impact the industrial action has had. That's why we haven't made as much.
So it's the doctor's fault.
He's going to go in on the doctor.
Blaming someone in the audience.
The time for let's not dwell on this. But PM, the point is that when you made the pledge, there were several NHS industry disputes happening at the time. Ambulance workers were on strikes, nurses had announced strikes, junior doctors were balloting, and you still made the pledge, and the numbers are up. Let's move on.
But having resolved all of the industrial action except the junior doctors, what you're now seeing is that the numbers are coming down. And we are making progress.
Junior doctors.
I might have not done brilliantly at maths at school, but I know that 7.2, 1 million, 7.5 is going up. Let's move on.
To be honest, it's not going up, it has gone up. So she's being a little bit unfair there.
Boat crossings are going up, aren't they?
Yes, they were down last year by a third. They're down over the last 12 months by a little less than that. This year, what we've seen is one particular country, Vietnam, accounting for the majority of the increase. But actually, the plans that we've put in place last year show that it is possible to make a difference to this problem, which, by the way, before I got this job, everybody said was impossible. Everybody said it was impossible to get the numbers down at all. But we showed last year that was possible. And now we have a clear
Boat
plan
crossings went down and then Vietnam
in place. And that means...
And I will come on to Rwanda, but look, crossings have risen by 40% this year against last year to 11,247 people crossing on small boats this year. It's going to be a record year. You have failed to deliver on this pledge. Please acknowledge it.
No, if you look at the sum total of the time that I've been Prime Minister, because you've picked one particular period, if you look at the sum total of the time that I've been Prime Minister, the numbers are down.
The numbers were down on last year. The numbers in 2023 were down on 2022.
It's because of the work that we've done.
It's a record year this year. They've gone up by 40%.
But if you look at because these things are cyclical, because what you've seen is one new country, Vietnam, accounting for a lot of the new arrivals.
All right.
And just as we dealt with Albania,
let's go back to basis. You said you were stopping small boats. Boat crossings are going up this year. Let's talk about Rwanda. You acknowledge that, don't you?
Being really brutal.
You will get the flights off the ground in July. You promised that.
Yes.
Flights off the ground, no if, no buts. How many flights and how many people are you going to send over the summer?
Doesn't matter. He's going to be in California in July.
We've already started detaining people. airfields on standby, planes are booked. The date for the first flight is out on the 24th, I think it is, of July. We haven't given more details beyond that to not compromise the operational security, but there will be a regular rhythm of flights, not just one. And the important point here is this is about establishing a deterrent, because I believe that if people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to have somewhere safe to remove them, and that's how we will stop the boats. And that's what Rwanda is about.
People on his side.
Can I just ask you one thing? If you were so confident about getting these flights off in July,
Slim
that this was
majority of
the
the electorate
apex really
support
of
the Rwanda
stopping
plan.
the boats, why did you call an election before voters could actually see it was happening? Because
Tory incompetence,
because
the great
an election is an
unifier.
important moment for our country, and my priority when I got this job was to restore economic stability. And we talked about bringing inflation down and getting the economy growing, and then being in a position, as we are now, to cut people's taxes. And for me, with that economic foundation established, it was the right moment to have an election to then discuss the future of our country. And this election is about the future. And you're right, on migration, there is a choice at this election, and elections have consequences. I've got a plan about what I want to do.
And I'm going to come on to that.
And Keir Starmer doesn't agree with that plan.
Okay, let's come on to that.
Can't tell you what he would do with illegal migrants. And that's a choice for everyone here and everyone watching. If you want to stop the boats, there's a choice of how you think that needs to be dealt with, and I'm the one that's got an answer for you.
And I would like to talk to you about a bigger issue that people are concerned about, which is legal migration. For many years, people were frustrated that immigration kept going up. It was the #1 reason for voters in the run-up to the EU referendum, one of the main reasons for Brexit. That's right, isn't it?
Immigration is too high.
No, one of the reasons people voted for Brexit was to take back control of our borders, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, let's just go and look at the record. Because what was the total net migration figure into the UK in the past 3 years?
Must pain Rishi Sunak to be a Brexiteer who doesn't get any credit for it.
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head for the past 3 years.
It's 1.9 million people in the last 3 years. What was the total net migration figure in the last 3 years running up to the 2016 referendum when we had freedom of movement?
About 900,000.
Do you know it?
I don't have it offhand.
It was 836,000 people. And I'm sure many people in this room would have voted for Brexit. 70% of people in Grimsby voted for Brexit. How do you think they feel about that when they hear that net migration into this country has more than doubled in the last 3 years from before we left the European Union?
Yeah, I'm sure it's too high. I've been very clear that it's too high. And I'm sure people feel frustrated and angry about it.
You were the original Brexiteer, weren't you? Well, you were one of the...
Yes, I did support
you were always
Brexit.
a Brexiteer.
Yes, and I believe that was the right decision for our country.
Frustrated, cynical,
absolutely.
betrayed?
I just said I'm sure people feel frustrated about that. And again, the numbers are too high. Of course they're too high. What I can tell you is what I've done since I've had this job, and that's last year. Yes, and the numbers are too high. I'm not making any bones about that. The numbers are too high.
You can't run against your own record, which is what they're doing now.
What I've done in the time I've had this job is already start to bring them down because we've taken action to change things. So last year the numbers were down by 10% already, and this year the number of visas that we've issued is down by around a quarter. And the forecasts show that we're on track to halve net migration in just over a year's time. So that shows and hopefully gives people some confidence we're now heading in the right direction. To give you an example of some of the things we've done, we've clamped down on abuse of the social care visa, tightened up the number of dependents that students can bring, and also raised the salary so that you have to earn £38,500 to come here on a work visa.
Okay.
Now, these measures are now starting to have an impact. You've seen that this year, as I said, numbers down by a quarter, forecast to fall by a halve overall for net migration.
So you're going to are you making that pledge now? What's your
substantive labour shortages? We're not going to mention that bit.
What we'll do is have actually a migration cap that's voted on in Parliament, so all your members of Parliament will vote every year on the number of migrants that will come. Well, that's, I said, the forecast at the moment is the numbers to halve, and then what we want to do is continue reducing it every year thereafter. But the key thing is here is there will be, for the first time, a legal cap on all migration so that we can guarantee that the numbers do continue to come down.
David Cameron 2010, tens of thousands reduced net migration. May 2017, Theresa May reduced net migration to tens of thousands. Boris Johnson, 2019, committed to making sure overall numbers come down below the then net migration figure of just over 250,000 people. Why should anyone believe anything that you say on immigration?
Because whatever you think about migration, that's a good point. They have completely broken all of their pledges.
And I can completely understand people's cynicism
I don't think they should have made the
about
pledges
this,
in the
but
first place. But
you can add to the end of that list, since I've been in charge, numbers down 10% and visas issued this year down by a quarter.
Okay.
Right, so that's I've had this job for 18 months. Numbers were down last year. They're down considerably at the start of this year, and they will keep coming down because of the measures that I've already announced.
1.9 million people in the last 3 years. Okay. But it's, that's the record. Let's go on to tax. You say that you will cut taxes. I was at your manifesto launch yesterday. Our economics editor, Ed Conway, calculates that the tax burden of the country will be higher than it is now under a future Conservative government, even taking into account your proposed tax cuts. That's right, isn't it?
No, I haven't seen that analysis, and I'm not sure that is right. What we announced yesterday,
is that wrong?
I haven't seen his analysis, so I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it. But what I can tell you is what our manifesto announced is, tax cuts for people at every stage of their life, for people in work, for people who are setting up small businesses and self-employed, for those young people who want to buy their first home, for pensioners and for families. So tax cuts for people at every stage of their lives, because I believe people should keep more of their hard-earned money. That's how you build financial security. And again, that's a choice for people at this election. I believe in cutting people's taxes, now that we're in a position to do so, having restored economic stability.
Can I just have a moment of honesty about this, though? Because today, taxes as a proportion of national income are at 36.5%. They will be at 36.7% of national income by the end of the coming Parliament with all your changes. So I know that you have introduced tax cut, but overall, taxes will still be going up, won't they, under a Conservative government?
Well, the tax burden is too high, and that is a reflection of the decision.
If she's saying it's going up
in the next Parliament, it will go up.
Taxes for people will continue to come down. That's the manifesto that we've announced. I haven't seen Ed's analysis. It's very hard for me to comment on it there. But what I can tell you is that the tax cuts that we've announced reduce the tax burden by about 1 percentage point of GDP a year compared to the spring budget last year. So again, I haven't seen his numbers. I can tell you my numbers, but I can give you.
So hang on, just to be clear, you're saying that taxes as a proportion of national income will come down at the end of the next Parliament under a Conservative government.
The tax cuts that we announced yesterday.
It's just
at the
a yes or
manifesto,
no.
But I don't have a forecast for the economy in 5 years' time. But what I can tell you is stamp duty for first-time buyers abolished. National insurance for self-employed abolished. Further cuts for national insurance. The triple lock plus to cut taxes for pensioners. No, but these are the practical tax cuts that will be delivered, and they'll impact everyone in a slightly different way. But the choice at this election is clear, because I want to keep cutting people's taxes. And look, you did mention the tax burden. Actually, can have a second to address that. Of course, it's high, but that's because I had to take decisions that were difficult as Chancellor after providing the support that we did during the pandemic for the NHS, for furlough, but also for energy bills. And the reasonable thing to do, the right thing to do for the country is to make sure that we secure our future and pay that back, and that requires difficult decisions.
Isn't the truth that your problem is broken promises, and it's deeper than the last couple of years? It's Brexit too. It's migration. It's migration. The NHS was meant to get better. We were all remember 350 million quid on the side of a bus, don't we? It's levelling up. It's a catalogue of broken promises. You must surely see why so many voters think it's time for you and the Conservatives to get your P45.
Well, I can absolutely.
Can you see why people hate you and want you to jump into the sea?
Of course I can understand people's frustrations. It's been a very difficult few years. We've been through 2 once-in-a-century shocks, which have had an enormous impact on everyone, on public services, on people's standard of living. Of course it has. When energy bills double, when inflation goes up to 11%, when a pandemic shuts down our economy, with all the impact on everyone's livelihoods, of course that's taken its toll. But this election now is about the future, and I do believe that we've turned a corner. And
Drink again, but we've already had
that people want to see positive change. And my only point would be that you don't get any change unless you've got a plan and you're prepared to do bold things, and that's what our manifesto sets out a way to do that.
Let me just ask you, we'll come to you in a moment. I've got running out of time. Now, I just want to ask you one more thing. You were once popular, you were dishy-rishy. Do you remember? Can you tell our audience something about you that might make them like you a bit more again?
Well, actually, funnily enough, people seem to think I have a very kind of healthy lifestyle and I go to the gym and all this section about my fasting. But I actually have an appalling diet because I eat an enormous amount of sugar and I'm very unhealthy in that regard, which I was talking to someone today about. They were completely shocked. I'm not sure that's not really something that someone needs to like me more or less, but that's something I was talking to someone today and they're genuinely surprised about the amount of Haribo, Twixes and everything else that I get through, particularly during a campaign. So contrary to popular belief, I don't have that healthier lifestyle or diet.
Okay, a sugar fiend. Wow. Prime Minister, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thing is, that's just an impossible question. Prove you're not boring, prove you're likeable. Like, prove you're not boring. Oh, I drowned a bag of cats once. Do you like that?
I would like to see sort of all the audience members sort of say, I did have a question about the NHS, but kind of, are you okay? From a member of the public, that would be like, I had a really tough question about your record and everything being terrible and you're going to lose, but, like, do you need some help?
Kind of worried about you.
Yeah, are you getting the support you need? Let's see if the audience can go harder than Bev. Well, I mean, Bev Ruby did very well, but let's see if they can make him cry, I suppose. That should be on the bingo card.
Audience turn to put the Prime Minister under the spotlight. And just to remind you, we're joined tonight by voters from across the political spectrum, independently chosen from here in Grimsby and right around the UK. Beth, it's over to you.
Thank you, SJ. Well, our first question from the audience comes from Ian. He's a retired teacher from Grimsby. There he is.
Good evening.
Hi, Ian.
Following Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget with its unfunded tax cuts, mortgages have become much less affordable, particularly for young people, such as my daughter. Why has your government spoilt their hopes and dreams? And how do we know you won't do it again?
Well, Ian, how old's your daughter?
She's 19.
And did you say she has a mortgage or she's looking to buy a home?
She was kind of hoping to buy a home until you put the mortgage rates up and you failed to meet your housing targets.
Just like she's 19. 19-year-olds don't buy houses anyway.
A property that she can afford.
Yeah. Well, look, I want everyone to be able to own their own home. It's a really magical thing when you can, whether your daughter and everyone else. And the best way for us to do that is to get interest rates down again in the first instance, and that's why I made a priority to bring inflation down, because that's how we will enable the Bank of England to then start cutting interest rates. And as you can see, inflation is down from 11% back to normal, so hopefully we're on the right path then, and you will see that reflected in mortgage rates. But actually in our manifesto, there were a couple of things that will help your daughter, and hopefully you can tell her about them, and hopefully she's watching. One of them was stamp duty. So what I will do if we're re-elected is to abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers, like your daughter, buying homes up to £425,000.
What we've seen with stamp duty freezes for first-time buyers is that it just made housing more expensive because people just added the tax duty, the stamp duty amount onto the asking price
of deposit that she otherwise wouldn't need to save for. And alongside that, we will also reintroduce a new version of Help to Buy, which allows her to buy a home with just a 5% deposit, because when I talk to people like your daughter, what they say to me is, actually, I will be able to probably just about afford the mortgage, but what's tricky is the time it takes to save up for a deposit. And we saw with the previous version of Help to Buy that it makes a big difference, because it saves a young couple or a young person years in having to save up for that deposit, because the Help to Buy loan steps in to plug the gap and saves people an enormous amount of money. So Help to Buy, together with a stamp duty abolition for first-time buyers, essentially, will help young people like your daughter, because I believe in a society where everyone can own their home, and if we're elected, we can cut taxes and build the home, so that's possible.
OK. Our next question is from Hamza, who
Everyone
works
just
in the
tuned out,
NHS.
I think,
He's
at that
from
point.
Hersham. Hamza, there you go.
Good evening, Prime Minister. As a proud member of staff in the NHS and a patient, I've seen firsthand the chronic effects of underfunding and staff shortages, especially post-Brexit.
I think we're going to get my dad was a GP and my mum was a pharmacist.
Difficult, and staff are continuously burnt out with waiting lists seeming to never end. And I've personally experienced being left on a stretcher for 8 hours in my local A&E department while in pain, just in the corridor. Going forward, how can you convince me that you'll restore our NHS to an institution that we can be proud of?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hamza, first of all, for what you do and all your colleagues do in our incredible NHS. And I'm very sorry to hear about your experience. I think the first thing to say to you is I come from an NHS family.
Hey.
So, like you, like my parents, they worked in the NHS. And my dad was a GP, my mum was a pharmacist. And
word for word.
They dedicated their lives
Word for
to
word.
helping people. And I was surrounded by that growing up. And actually what they instilled in me was an importance of how we can continue to help people. And I worked for my mum doing exactly that. So that's the first thing you need to know about me when it comes to the NHS. And that's why we've put record funding into it. But your point is the right one. What we have not done for not just years, but for decades, is train enough staff and then be reliant on having to bring people here from abroad. And in the NHS's 75-year history, it has never, ever had a
staff
long-term
retention.
workforce.
You don't pay them enough, so then they
For
move
the first
abroad.
time it does. Because I thought that was the right thing to prioritise. And we announced it together. It was the NHS's plan that the government has fully backed. And I said to them, look, this is the right thing to do because we need to train more doctors, nurses, dentists, physiotherapists, everything today so that in years to come, the NHS will have the staff that it needs to ease some of the pressures, reduce reliance on staff from overseas and make sure it's a fantastic career for everybody. And look, candidly, we're the best one in the world. You know, I won't be here in the 14 years that it takes to train a consultant that we're paying
Candidly,
for today.
I am moving
But I
to
thought it was
America
the
in
right thing
August.
To do to strengthen our NHS for the long term, because people like you are brilliant. We want to make sure we train as many of you as possible so we have lots of colleagues, ease the burden and get everyone the care that they need.
But just coming back on that, if you look post-Brexit, when we lost a huge majority of the staff that we had in our NHS, there wasn't a plan to fill those gaps and led to chronic shortages. Then we had the COVID pandemic, which this country was not prepared for, and I worked through and saw the amount of people that were affected, burnt out. I had a close family member who was going through the COVID pandemic and now is living with long COVID and had to wait weeks to even get on a ventilator. And then the economy, under your leadership as Chancellor and under Boris Johnson, who you supported, we tried to get back as soon as possible, not thinking that this was still an ongoing pandemic. Boris was too late bringing in the lockdown rules. You were really quick to open up lockdown again, which led to another spike in COVID
He's out to help out.
cases. And this is what has led to continuous, this is what has led to this long term of trying to rebuild the NHS. Now, you say that you're coming from an NHS background and you have this instilled value of caring for the NHS. How are we going to do that if you try and undermine it at every level?
With greatest respect, that's not what we're doing. We're investing record sums into it. We're training more doctors and nurses than we ever have, and there are more doctors and nurses in the NHS today than it's also had. But we also need to do things differently. And it's whether it's things, and you'll know this from, and what's your particular specialty?
So I'm a physiologist in cardiology.
And you're a cardiology, right? So you'll know that we're doing things like elective surgical hubs, virtual wards, community diagnostic centres, of which there's one right here in Grimsby. And those are all new innovations that you and your colleagues have pioneered, that we have supported, that will actually mean that people can get the care they need quicker and secure the NHS for the long term.
We're going to take from the hospitals to the hubs to staff them because there's shortages of the staff already. We're short of radiographers, all the trades, all the different specialities throughout the hospitals. We're short of staff. So building another building that's going to move it from the hospital is not going to cure the problem. It's just going to make it worse.
Good point.
Thank you. I just to answer that. So, ma'am, we are recruiting and training more doctors, nurses than we ever have in our history, and there are more today. And I know we need more, and that's why we've made those investments. But
I'm going to wrap this.
But I will just pick
I've got so many questions.
But I think that's very important. Where I just very respectfully disagree with you, actually based on the clinical advice that we have from all our leading medics, is that we can improve care for people by doing things outside of hospital. And the Community Diagnostic Centre, one of which is here, is a great example of that, where you can get your checks and tests and scans quicker. Another example of that is pharmacies. right? Because I think that you should be able to go and see your pharmacist to get treatment rather than your GP for common ailments. That's a change that we've brought in that already millions of people are benefiting from. And again, it's just an example of doing things differently to get people the care that they need.
Look at all these questions. I'm under pressure here. Christina from London, please.
Hi. There are people who grow up in communities like mine that are concerned about policing. Statistics show that systemic racism, sexism and misogyny are still prevalent in UK policing. Do you accept that these issues are in fact systemic? And what are your plans to improve relations and build trust between the police and our communities?
I think this is the first policing question I've heard, which isn't
misogyny, racism, discrimination has
crackdown.
absolutely no place in our society, but particularly when it comes to the police, because they're people that we look to protect us and trust, and all the things that we've seen and read about over the past year or two have been really appalling and shocked us to our core, because we thought, hang on, the people that we put our trust in, they're a small minority, and we shouldn't tar the entire police force with the actions of a small minority, but a small minority of people who were behaving in a way that was completely reprehensible. And it's right that those people are held to account. Now, the Met in particular, there are issues, and actually we instituted a report which was done, which now the new Met Police Commissioner is working through to improve relations and make sure the Met is focused on policing in the right way. But I also want to make sure that our communities are safe. Safe for you, safe for everyone else, safe for my two girls to walk around in, which is why we're putting more police officers on the street, giving them the appropriate powers they need, and toughening up sentencing, particularly for the most violent crimes, and focusing especially on violence against women and girls. So that's what we're doing on policing. Police numbers today are at a record high, and if we're elected, then we'll put 8,000 more police officers on the street, warranted officers, which one extra one for every neighbourhood, because I think to that lady's point, that neighbourhood policing is really important, and having police officers who know their communities well, and I was out with some not that long ago, where they can build those relations is really important.
What's also important is accepting that it is a systemic issue. First you accept that, and then you can plan to change the things so that these things don't happen again. It's not just bad apples if it happens over and over again.
And in the Met in particular, as I said, there are a range of issues. We instituted a report to look into them, and the new Met Police Commissioner is there and is reforming the Met so that it can actually learn from the mistakes of the past and let's make sure that these things don't happen again.
Right, thank you. Our next question comes from Amy from Leeds. There she is, please, Amy.
Hi, Prime Minister.
Hi.
My name's Amy. I'm a former Conservative Party chair and a lifelong True Blue. But in this election, I find myself an undecided voter. Actions taken by this government actually make me feel ashamed. You left David Cameron at the D-Day celebrations to represent our country. To me, this feels like a deliberate action, as you know that your ratings in the polls are so low. How do you plan to rebuild the public's trust in you, or is it already irreparable?
Well, Amy, thank you.
Kill a blow from a Conservative Party chair.
Thank you for all your previous volunteering and service to the party. And when it comes to D-Day, as I said, I absolutely did not mean to cause any offence or hurt. That was not my intention. I made a mistake and I unreservedly apologise for it, and all I can do is ask for people's forgiveness. And when it comes to trust in my commitment to our veterans community and the pride that I have in what they've done for our country, what I would say to people is you can look at the things that we've done. There is a veterans minister sitting around the cabinet table for the first time with more funding than we've ever had, focused on supporting veterans with their mental health, physical health, employment opportunities, housing, because it's something I care deeply about. But more generally at this election, as you said, you're undecided. This election is about the future and the future that you want for our country. And I believe that the manifesto that we put out yesterday contains a very clear plan, a bold set of actions that will deliver a more secure future for you and everybody. And that starts with cutting everyone's taxes, because I believe people should keep more of their hard-earned money. It means bringing migration down. It means a more sensible approach to net zero that prioritises our energy security and your family bills. And it means protecting pensioners. Because I think if you've worked hard all your life, you deserve dignity in retirement. So those are some of the things I talked about yesterday. That's a choice at this election. It's an important moment for our country. But given the opportunity, I can deliver a secure future for you and everyone else.
And I would, thank you so much. I would usually agree. I just think that, and I'll be very honest here, that picture of the Queen, our late Queen, who was left to bury her husband on her own, during COVID, following guidance that we all followed and knowing what was happening in Downing Street, and you were part of that and you had a fixed penalty notice.
Queen was by herself.
Apologised, and I understand all of
Whereas
that.
you were getting
That's where the
lit
trust broke down. And I
in
just
Downing
think
Street.
We have long memories in this country.
Wearing a beer
as
helmet.
public, and you really will have to go some. And I appreciate
That's a good line.
your
We have
comments
long
tonight.
memories in this country.
But that you have to realise that there is a long way to go to really rebuild that.
Yeah, no,
Well, unfortunately, I've only got 3 weeks.
Those rules were difficult for everyone to follow, and the government should absolutely have gone above and beyond in following them. And I deeply regret what happened. I apologise for it at the time, and it was an extraordinarily difficult time for our country, and I know that, and I know that people will remember that. And all I can say is, look, trust takes time to rebuild through actions, and whether it was what we did during COVID to support the NHS, roll out the vaccine, support people's jobs, what I've done over the past 18 months to deliver on restoring economic stability and start making progress on bringing migration down. That's how you earn trust, through your actions, making progress on the things that matter to people. And that's what I plan to talk to people about through the rest of this campaign. And yesterday's manifesto sets out a direction of travel for the future.
Should Amy and other Conservatives vote for reform?
No. Very
It's interesting he
no.
hasn't attacked Labour yet.
The reason for that, and I'm glad you asked the question, right? The reason for that is a vote for reform ultimately.
People only
is a
say I'm
vote
glad
for
you asked
Keir
the
Starmer
question
into
when
number
they
10.
fucking
So
hate the question.
We might get blank
who
check.
cares about cutting taxes.
No.
If you're someone who cares about cutting taxes, protecting pensions, a sensible approach to net zero that prioritises security in your bills, or indeed bringing migration down, both illegal migration and stopping the boats, I'm the person that is going to deliver that for you, not Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer doesn't have a plan to tackle illegal migration. Right? Keir Starmer is not going to cut your taxes. Keir Starmer is going to reverse all the reforms I made to getting us to net zero in a way that saves you money, and that's going to put up everyone's bills. So that's the choice, right? And Keir Starmer is certainly not matching the triple lock plus, which is going to protect pensioners, and instead there's going to be a retirement tax for every pensioner in our country. So that's the choice for you and for everyone else thinking about it on the issues that you care about. Who is more likely to deliver for you? And a vote for anyone who's not a Conservative is just a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10.
PM, I've got another question. It's from William. Where is he? He's a student from Grimsby. There he is.
Hi there. Thank you.
We've only got 2 out of 5.
Given the recent policy announcements regarding national service for younger people, and you alluded to the quadruple lock on state pensions, as well as your record and the Conservatives' record in government, why would a young person today believe the Conservative Party has their best interests at heart?
Say national service is in your best interest.
William, actually on national service, I have 2 young girls. I'm incredibly excited for them to do it because I think it'll be transformative for our country. I really do, because it'll provide skills and opportunities for young people that will set them up for the rest of their lives, foster a culture of service in our society, bring people closer together and contribute to our long-term resilience and security. And actually everywhere I've been, people have been really positively talking to me about it, and actually parents more than anyone else excited about what it will do for their kids. But more broadly, so that's just one thing, right? A couple of days after that, we announced another big policy where I want to provide opportunities for young people, you and everyone else, which is why we're going to curb the investment into rip-off degrees, which let young people down, and take that money and use it to fund 100,000 high-quality apprenticeships, which actually can provide an enormous opportunity for people. And the answer to the question, I think Ian's first question, wasn't it, Ian? There you are, Ian's daughter, with buying a house. Because when I talk to young people, that's the thing, they want a great job, they want to be able to buy their own home. And what we announced yesterday in the manifesto, a couple of days ago, is going to make a big difference, because it's going to mean that it's much easier for young people to get on the housing ladder and buy their first home. So whether it's an amazing apprenticeship, whether it's national service, whether it's buying your own home, actually what you're seeing are bold ideas that will make a big difference and spread opportunity around.
Just say no. Are you going to criminalise them? Are you going to set a generation of young people up with criminal records for just saying no?
No, of course not. Of course not. Of course that's not the thing. And actually what we said we would do is set up a royal commission, which we haven't had in this country for actually about 25 years, and they're set up independently to look at big things like this. And there are lots of models from across Europe that you can look at to make sure that we have an appropriate mix appropriate mix of incentives and sanctions, and that's how other countries do it. And actually, if
You quite like the
if
forced
talk
labour
to
for children
other
policy, don't you,
countries
Michael?
around Europe,
I just don't
when
think
you
it's
talk
as
to them,
bad as people make out.
the percentage of young people that recommend it and love it is extremely high. And
Community service didn't do me any harm, Ash.
I'd really like
Get
to get
them kids up chimneys, that's what I say.
Yeah.
Either in
The
tanks or
national
up
service
chimneys.
policy, it might be popular amongst parents, as you said. The quadruple lock on pensions might be popular amongst parents and older generations, but it's not popular amongst younger people. Why are you moving your party so far away from younger voters when it's the key demographic that will be our future?
The fetus is right.
Because I won't
agree
be
with that
here, my
embryo.
friend.
Can I answer the question?
Well, I can't get the... Yeah, go on.
So
wanted to
William,
get
look,
some
I think national service is transformational and positive for young people. I think cutting stamp duty and Help to Buy to get young people their first home is really positive for young people. I think creating more high-quality apprenticeships is really good for young people. And when young people getting into work, getting a tax cut so they can keep more of their hard-earned money is really positive for young people. And actually, I don't view society as an us versus them, because every young person also has a grandparent, and I think they want their grandparents to be looked after when they retire, and that's why I think it's right to do the triple lock plus 2, and I think you agree with that as well.
Happy with that? You happy with that,
Reasonable round of
William?
applause from there.
Yeah, but I think we can do both at the same time.
And that's the point, we are doing both. We're cutting taxes for young people buying their first home, creating new apprenticeships, and the triple lock plus to protect pensioners who have worked hard all their lives and are grandparents to those young people. We are doing those things, and as I said when I was sitting there, we can cut taxes for people at every stage of their life. That's the type of country I want to build.
OK, I'm afraid we are out of time. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us here in Grimsby tonight. Thank you.
I do want to talk to you about the national service thing, Michael, because I'm sure community service didn't do you any harm. But what's interesting is that it is actually something for nothing culture. You're asking for something from young people, and you're not giving them anything in return for it. Whereas, like, you know, when you've got national service and shit like that, you should probably have like a GI Bill, you know, a range of benefits that come from having choice taken away from you in terms of how you spend your time.
Yeah, I mean, people should get paid for it. People should get paid for it. Young people need more money, but I don't mind a little bit of, you know, some service, getting people to do everything. Not everything, some things.
What we've witnessed this evening from the spin room. This has
By the
been
way, if any of you were
number 10.
thinking Michael and Ash looked pretty glazed over for the past 10 minutes, that was actually a form of political analysis where we were sort of, through our body language, explaining how the rest of the country are feeling. Because the big sort of meta-narrative about this general election at the moment is whatever Rishi Sunak says, no one is listening, right? I think there's sort of, I mean, people keep calling it a punishment beating. People like to see Rishi Sunak getting humiliated. So sort of when Beth Rupee was asking those questions and it was really awkward, I think probably people were sort of like tuning in. And then the moment he talks about policy and what his plans are, everyone just switches off because they're like, well, he's clearly not going to do any of these plans because he's not going to get elected. And also, I mean, they've been in power for 14 years and the country sucks. Nothing works. So as soon as he discusses policy, just no one's listening. So if it looked like we'd glazed over, so would everyone. In a moment, we'll break down the most interesting moments. First, though, we are funded entirely by our audience. NovaraMedia.com/support is the website to donate to us on a regular basis. That link is in the description. Ash, we've got some highlights coming up. Very quickly, though, your initial summary of how that debate went for each leader.
What's interesting to me is that Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, as people, strike me as very similar. They're both technocrats. They both like to stress their competence in dealing with, you know, big systems and institutional thinking, and they both get tetchy under pressure. What makes a world of difference is who's on the way up and who's on the way down. That feeling that Rishi Sunak is in a sort of terminal descent makes everything a lot worse. Whereas Keir Starmer, when he knows what his position in the polls are, he knows that, you know, this is basically a done deal unless something spectacular happens. He's able to be quite confident even when dealing with questions which might be a little bit more critical from the audience. But those core weaknesses of tetchiness and the tendency to avoid being pinned down on things that make them uncomfortable, they both have. The thing which sort of makes one look, the thing which makes one person come out better than the other is that political momentum is behind them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think, people have been sort of saying Keir Starmer isn't going to get the benefit of the doubt once he's elected because people don't have this massive warmth towards him. But he is getting the benefit of the doubt, I think, in this election because people are like, we want you to be Prime Minister now. We don't like that other guy. When Keir Starmer talks about Labour's plans, I think people listen. When Rishi Sunak talks about Tory plans, no one listens, right? There's no one wants to hear what that guy has to say other than sort of when he's suffering a punishment beating by a host, as Beth Rigby did fairly effectively, I have to say. Let's look at some interesting moments. We'll start with Keir Starmer. The interview with Starmer, I think, was pretty decent. Keir Starmer will be happy with how it came out, but it did start in a pretty difficult manner for him because it challenged him from the left on a few fronts, but notably, Beth Rigby basically got Starmer to admit he's a liar.
You asked people to elect Jeremy Corbyn as their Prime Minister. You said, I do think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn, did you mean that?
I was certain that we would lose the 2019 election.
That wasn't my question.
I was certain that we would lose it. I did campaign for Labour. Of course I did. I will openly say I campaigned for Labour. I wanted good colleagues to be returned into the Labour Party.
When you said it.
And I wanted a party that was capable of being changed so we could face the future again.
Did you not mean it when you said it?
I was certain that we would lose. And I think many other people were certain that we would lose.
So you didn't mean it?
I was certain that we would lose.
So you said it because you didn't think he would be Prime Minister anyway?
I think she should have gone further. Apparently an audience member sort of called out that he was a liar, but I think Beth Rigby should have gone further and said, did you lie then? Right? Lots of people have lost trust in politicians because they lie. Sounds to me like you're saying you said you wanted him to become Prime Minister. You're not saying that anymore. Did you lie? You're not saying that you thought that at the time. Did you lie? Ash, how awkward do you think sort of those moments were for Keir Starmer? It does seem like at that point the audience weren't convinced.
I would say important but not impactful. So it's important because I think it sets up some of the themes which may well come to dog him when he's in office and perhaps Labour are beginning to struggle a little bit. Because one of the things that we do find with political journalists is that they magically start noticing things which were obvious to, people who were on the left for ages and that they'd stonewalled before. So this matter of Keir Starmer's honesty, well, really before we got to this general election, there was a kind of wall of silence around it. And in fact, you had journalists who I think played quite an active role in the deception. For instance, Seb Payne, when he was at the Financial Times, was told by a Starmer advisor, look at these 10 pledges, not one of them will bind our hands. The fact that he didn't report that at the time made him party to people being lied to. Now, Beth Rigby is pressing Keir Starmer on it, and I think that it was a very good thing to do, and I think she's doing it because it's a line of attack which hasn't really been taken by the other big political reporters, and so there's that space was left open to her, and I think it did make him uncomfortable because he was just flagrantly dishonest. Either he meant what he said but changed his mind, and maybe that could have been something that he said, or he was lying when he said it, or he's lying now about what he believes, and he comes across as like a bit tetchy and very untrustworthy. Now, I don't think that's going to be impactful in terms of this election. It's a done deal. I think that the Conservatives have tanked it so badly. It's outside of something spectacular or the biggest polling error that the country or even the world has ever seen. Keir Starmer is going to be the Prime Minister. But when the shine starts coming off the apple, my oh my, what all the hacks will start noticing. It'll be the stuff that we've been saying for years, which can be very frustrating. But that's what they do. That's what they did with Boris Johnson. It's what they're doing with Rishi Sunak. It's what they did with Liz Truss. They just start noticing what was in front of their faces the whole time.
I think that's a very good way of putting it. In terms of Starmer looking a little bit shifty, I mean, as I say, I think he did pretty well in front of the audience and answering their questions. But when challenged on improving people's living standards, he still couldn't give a proper answer on where he'll get the money from.
If tax is not going up, how are you going to fund it?
We need to put money and resource into Grimsby. We need resource decision-making to come. So we have to be bold enough in government to release that so that there's more power here in Grimsby. They're difficult things to do. Governments haven't done that in the past, but we have to do that.
I mean, that just completely avoided the question. She was asking, how are you going to pay for it? He said, well, we'll put more power to Grimsby. I suppose he knows that there's not going to be that much of a follow-up from the audience. So, but yeah, it was somewhat strange. We had on our bingo cards, my dad was a toolmaker, and the audience actually laughed when Starmer said that soundbite.
When I grew up, my dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory. It's true.
He actually did have a response. It's true, because he was making a broader point about poverty or whatever. On this, it is interesting because often the case is that people say if you're engaged in politics and you get bored by hearing XYZ, 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 because it keeps getting repeated, that's probably smart politics because they're not trying to communicate to people who follow politics. They're trying to communicate to people who might have only really sort of listened to Keir Starmer for more than 10 minutes in these debates. So that's why he sort of repeats the toolmaker thing, that my parents were, worked in the NHS. And I suppose even though, the fact that people laugh does mean that has cut through. People do know that Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker, right? And so that might make him a bit more relatable than Rishi Sunak, who went to a very posh private school. Morgan D with a fibre, just updated my CV with my parents' jobs roles. Can't believe I've been doing it wrong all these years. Proud Novara media supporter. So, very good point. But I mean, I suppose, as a politician, they're trying to give you a more rounded sense of who they are. This was probably Keir Starmer's strongest moment, I think. He comfortably handled defending his policy on charging VAT to private schools.
In our state secondary schools, we've got thousands of teachers missing in the subjects that we need. So in a state secondary school, let's take maths. Too many students, young people, children are being taught by maths by sports teachers, by supply teachers, and that's not acceptable. And for those children in a state secondary school who don't have the teachers they need, that's not a one-year problem or a two-year budgeting problem. It's a lifelong problem because if they don't get the qualifications they need at 15 and 16, they can't go and do what they want. So we need to recruit 6,500 teachers for our state secondary schools to make sure every child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, whichever school they go to, has the same opportunity. And I'll be pressed when I say going to recruit 6,500 teachers. Beth and others will say to me, where's the money for that? And I say we will get rid of the tax break for private schools and use that money directly to fund those teachers in our state secondary schools.
It's a really strong moment. I think especially sort of when, the parent who's sort of saying I'm an average parent, even though only 7% of parents send their kids to private school, of course. So I'm an average. You're not an average parent by definition. Anyway, Keir Starmer sort of saying, I know you have aspiration about your kids' educations, but every single parent in this country has aspirations about their kids' education. And so therefore, we need to put more money into state schools. Very, very strong. And I have to say here on this, Ash, this is where the electoral strategy of Labour has been sort of fairly impressive, because we talk a lot, and it's true that there is a sort of, the level of political debate in this country, there's a real problem whereby Labour's plans don't really make sense because they're not raising enough tax to pay for the sort of improvements in the country that they want, or to not do austerity. I mean, the key issue is they're not raising enough tax to not do austerity. But they've decided they can do that all after the election anyway. And the fact that they're fighting on this issue of VAT on private schools, they've created this dividing line on VAT on private schools and this dividing line on tax on non-doms. That's clever politics, isn't it?
Well, look, I think that is a good policy, right? I'd say, slap VAT on the school fees, strip private schools of their charitable status. They're not fucking charities. It's not a philanthropic enterprise to get Tarquin into Oxford. I think that these are all sensible things to do. And I also think that politicians are often strongest when they're not going for a fudge. So rather than trying to placate this gentleman by simply being like, oh, it's not going to be that bad, he's like, look, I don't think that these things are going to happen, but here's why I'm doing it. And I'm really, really confident and sincere in my belief in what we're doing. And that always makes politicians look good. But the thing to, drill into, and this is always the smoke and mirrors element of politics. And if you dig deep into the numbers, the promise of 6,500 new teachers works out as 0.2 new teachers per school. So there'll have to be prioritization and allocation of these teachers. I don't think that you can cut newly qualified teachers into fifths. But in terms of what the education system needs, it is a hell of a lot more. So this is the bigger picture, which is I think you've got these quite uncontroversial taxes, whether it's windfall taxes on the big energy producers, whether it's closing non-dom tax loopholes, or it's putting VAT on private school fees. These are actually quite small amounts. I think they can work, and they can sort of maybe lever open a little bit of room to come through with more populist tax measures where it's very much focused on the rich and the super rich. But on its own, it's not enough to deal with the problems in the public sector.
Let's move on to Rishi Sunak. Now, there was a lot of groaning from the audience throughout his appearance. Clearly a lot of frustration in the room. They didn't like the guy very much. And the audience, in fact, didn't even wait for the audience questions segment to get stuck into challenging him. Firstly, Beth Rigby went through each of Sunak's pledges. This is on national debt.
Promise number 3, reducing national debt. It's gone up since you made the pledge, hasn't it? It has.
Yes, yeah. But it was always meant to come down over time. And that was always the time. It's gone up.
Really awkward moment. He was sort of trying to say the pledge was always about bringing down debt over the long term, so sort of like over a 5 or 10 year period. It's like, well, then why put that into a pledge? If it was impossible for you to meet it, why put it there in the first place? It's just this very sort of technocratic, I'm here explaining to you what the OBR's job is to do. Like, no one's buying it. Similar situation on NHS waiting lists. It wasn't a good look when Sunak attacked junior doctors, one of whom was in the audience.
You had a question earlier from, I think there was a junior doctor here, and I think everyone knows the impact the industrial action has had. That's why we haven't made as much.
So it's the doctor's fault. The point.
Now, actually, you remember, one of the reasons he might have felt confident was because in that ITV debate between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak actually got an audience round of applause for sort of taking a dig at the junior doctors for saying, I'm not going to pay them 35%, and sort of blaming them for some of the fact that the waiting lists haven't gone down. That got him a round of applause. He tried it again there with a junior doctor in the audience, and they weren't really having it. On home ownership for young people, the audience also weren't impressed by his answer on abolishing stamp duty.
What I will do if we're re-elected is to abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers, like your daughter, buying homes up to £425,000. And
to be honest, Mr. Sunak, I don't think she was thinking of buying a house that expensive.
No.
I mean, the problem here, so this abolishing stamp duty for first-time buyers, I mean, it will presumably make property ever so slightly cheaper for first-time buyers. And because it only applies to first-time buyers, presumably it won't all be applied to the price of a house. But the big issue with home ownership isn't stamp duty. It's not actually the deposit. It's the fact that homes are absolutely enormous multiples of incomes. So it was the case in the 90s that sort of a home would cost about 3 times your annual income. Now it's the case in many parts of the country that a home will cost 15 times your annual income. So some tweaks here and there when it comes to stamp duty for first-time buyers, or when it comes to, I mean, all they got, the landlord won't get paid capital gains tax if they sell to their tenants. I imagine that being used about 10 times over the whole country. You've got a country of 80 million people. I'm out. 10 people probably do that. Anyway, doesn't seem to have worked. The Tories have released policies to persuade older voters, but at the expense of the young. Here's Sunak being challenged directly on that.
The national service policy, it might be popular amongst parents, as you said. The quadruple lock on pensions might be popular amongst parents and older generations, but it's not popular amongst younger people. Why are you moving your party so far away from younger voters when it's the key demographic that will be our future?
I think national service is transformational and positive for young people. I think cutting stamp duty and Help to Buy to get young people their first home is really positive for young people. I think creating more high-quality apprenticeships is really good for young people. And when young people getting into work, getting a tax cut so they can keep more of their hard-earned money is really positive for young people. And actually, I don't view society as an us versus them, because every young person also has a grandparent, and I think they want their grandparents to be looked after when they retire, and that's why I think it's right to do the triple lock plus 2, and I think you agree with that as well.
The kid seemed kind of persuaded at the end of that. Ash, I mean, the big story of Rishi Sunak is no one cares what he says, right? I mean, was there any moment that you think might have persuaded a single voter in this country that maybe they would give Rishi Sunak a second chance?
Well, what's interesting is that in the first week of the general election, the thing which by far and away had the most cut through was national service. And that's because it was appealing to older voters who think that, young people don't have any sense of responsibility, they don't want to work, blah, 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 blah. That had cut through. And then I think it was just immediately undermined by the D-Day stuff, because you can't be like, oh yeah, national service for young people, get them cleaning tank cannons, and then be perceived as being disrespectful to the armed forces, and in particular with regards to World War II, which is as close as we come to a state religion in this country. So I think that that's all gone backwards for him. I think on the question of national service, and, I know I was joking around with you a bit, but I'm not opposed to the idea of what you would call non-punitive, as in non-punishment community service for young people. But there have to be benefits for it. Whereas right now, what we've done to young people is we've said, okay, you have to do really, really fucking well in your exams, and they're going to be more stressful than they used to be. You're going to have to go to university and take on all this debt. And also, by the way, like non-degree level jobs will be very, very badly paid. So this is your only shot. Welcome to absolutely extortionate housing costs in the private rental sector. Good luck if you ever want to own a house. That's what people are graduating into. That's what they're growing into. So if you say, oh yeah, and we're also going to make you do national service, even if it doesn't have to be for the army, but we're going to make you do national service, it is the definition of something for nothing. And the reason why I talked about the GI Bill isn't because I'm like, yeah, send them all into the army and then like give them a GI Bill. That's an example of countries recognizing that when you do force, and in particular young people, when you force people into doing something with their lives that they don't want to do, there has to be something at the end of it. And that's the thing which bothers me about this national service idea, is that one, it's framed around the military, basically to appear to like jingoistic and nationalistic impulses. And two, there's nothing at the end of it for young people.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. And there's actually a sort of more direct analogy than the GI Bill, which is just the Nordic countries. So in Denmark, they have national service. Lots of people sort of volunteer to do the military version of it. In Sweden, they do. Lots of these Northern European countries, they have some form of it. It's, it varies in how mandatory it is. The Swiss one does seem to be quite mandatory. Anyway, I did do research for this on the show recently. I've kind of forgotten the precise details for each country. But what all of them have in common is young people can look forward to free education, right? They can look forward to grants as they go to university. They can look forward to having a sort of brilliant welfare state to rely on. So you are giving something to a country which is giving you a lot back. And I 100% agree with you that, our governments have not done enough for young people to then ask them to do any kind of compulsory voluntary service. My issue was more that I felt like people were sort of talking about it as if this was this crazy authoritarian sort of proto-fascist policy, which I think it isn't. But I do agree that it doesn't work in this country right now. Winner, Ash? Who was the winner of the evening?
I think the clear winner was Keir Starmer. And that's not because he's the strongest politician in the world. It's because he's a very lucky politician, which means that his weaknesses aren't put under quite so much pressure.
Yeah, I think that's true. I would add as well, I think that was definitely the case for the interview with Beth Rigby, where I think he just survived. I do think that when he was talking to the audience, he actually did look the most confident and comfortable I think I've probably ever seen him. Maybe he's growing into the role to sound, a bit banal, sort of very sort of lobby journalist thing to say, isn't it? I think you might be growing into the role. Sam Coates from Sky has a poll. Who won Sky event? According to YouGov, they agree with us. Starmer 64%, Sunak 36%. That's very different to the ITV debate, where I can't remember which one of them actually won, but it was 52-48. So basically
Sunak.
the public were complete. Was it Sunak? But the public were basically split down the middle, weren't they?
Sunak.
Whereas now there's a clear winner, which was Keir Starmer. Let's wrap up there. Thank you, Ash. It's been a pleasure being joined by you this evening.
It's been great. And you know what? Elderflower tap water cocktail. It was delicious. I'm not going to be drinking that at the weekend, though.
I've finished my red stripe. I'm bursting for a piss. I'm glad we're ending. The next televised event will be on tomorrow. Moya Lovia McLean and Aaron Bastani will be hosting live coverage of ITV's multi-party debate. Obviously, Novara Live will also be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. for a usual show. We'll see you then. Good night.